o'clock. I'll call the meeting to order. I'm Grace Lesperance, Cascade Township Supervisor. Clerk Slater, please call the roll.
Trustee Nordhook.
Here.
Trustee McDonald.
Here.
Supervisor Lesperance.
Here.
Treasurer Corstange.
Here.
Trustee Kessel.
Here.
Trustee Shipley.
Present.
And Clerk Slater here.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there a motion or discussion for approval of tonight's agenda?
Shipley makes a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Support.
It's a motion by Trustee Shipley, supported by Trustee McDonald to approve the agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Article 4, presentations. We have one this evening, a quarterly update from our new and first Parks Director, Melanie Mannion. Director Mannion, thank you.
Thank you. And I need to apologize right off the bat, but it appears that it's not working. So you're going to get a verbal presentation today. And would it be okay if I did a follow-up with the slideshow in your email so you can look at it later? And maybe we can even post it online as well for those. And again, I apologize. I will have to look at it because unfortunately I don't have it memorized. So again, thank you. And as you may recall, we do these quarterly reports. Traditionally Jenny Wanty, our Parks Committee Chair, would do these reports. And now I get the honor of being able to do these reports. So these are done quarterly, just to keep you abreast of what we're doing in the Parks Department. Most importantly, to show you what we're spending our taxpayers' dollars on and making sure that it's something that we all agree is benefiting our community. So this is our quarterly report. And as you cannot see, I have a lovely picture of the dam at Tassel Park, followed by several pictures of some of the problems that we continue to have, as I've mentioned in the past. We do currently have a mason looking at a lot of the issues with the pillars that are out there. And some of them are very much just cosmetic, but there are others that actually are structural and are creating a hazard. So we're looking for 3 bids right now. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of masons in the area, and therefore this is a very specific project, but we are trying to do that and we're hoping to get it done in the next couple of months.
Which one is where is this?
At Tassel Park. At Tassel.
Restrooms are different. Sorry.
This is different. This is actually, if you go there, there are many different pillars that are throughout the park. Some of them have our donors' names on plaques there. Others are just aesthetic. And most of them have mortar issues. They actually need like grout replaced. But there are several of the pillars and I have a picture of it showing the inside is actually not rotted out, but has lost structural integrity. And there's fear of them collapsing. And since several of them are quite large, it is a safety issue. Additionally, we have started the replanting. If you can remember, we've lost about 55% or more in our landscape plants. So one of the things we did is we took some of the plants that were planted in the DDA that were a little hazardous because they did not show where the medians were in Centennial Park. And so we wanted to replant those with plants that are a little taller so that people can see where they are. A lot of them were hostas and other things. So we did that. And then again, we have another order coming next month to replace the others that are missing. And of course, Trustee Nordhoek did an excellent job of helping us with our bathroom issue. We thought we might have had some structural issues with the bathroom, but it turns out that we think it's just a paint issue. And so we are going to do remodeling of that bathroom, repainting, refinishing so that it looks new again instead of the old dilapidated that it looks right now. So thank you very much for your time. We also have been working at White Cliff Park, not at the park, but in the planning process of the park. And next meeting, I will be bringing you a resolution of some ideas that we'd like to have implemented, maybe even as early as this year. But in anticipation of those larger construction projects, we will be putting out signage very soon. We're in the process of getting quotes for the sign. And also we have a work day to help us create the natural trail around so that we can do that with little to no cost to our taxpayers. And then we also will be putting a bench out there for people to start utilizing that park and seeing that it is such an important cornerstone within that area of the township. And of course, we'll be doing some native plantings out there as well to help mitigate some of the flooding issues that we've had there in the past. Probably Cascade Rec Park has had the most work done in the last 3 months. You may remember we have a DTE tree grant that our former manager was able to secure, and we were to plant 25 trees there to help not only offset, to help mitigate some of the noise pollution and air pollution coming off the highway, but also to create some shade for our visitors and some wildlife habitat, and just, beautify the park. And so we are very fortunate to say that we planted all native species. We planted a diversity of species. And the best part is we've already put in 46 different species, plants, and I think we're going to be able to afford even more. But that grant is due next week. So it's just a matter of trying to see if I can find some more trees in time, but we've already far exceeded the grant and we're very much under budget. So very excited about that. So we hope that you can go out there. We did, because native trees of that size are hard to secure. We had to go to 3 different places, and I'm very grateful that we have a partnership with Kelvin College. Their Plaster Creek Stewards program, they have a nursery. And so they were able to give us several tree species that you would not be able to get commercially, including an American chestnut blight resistant American chestnut. So if anyone knows about the chestnut blight, this is a tree that it's a disease that almost wiped out what American chestnuts in the United States, and they found one that's resistant. So we're excited to have that out there. So again, I hope you get out there. And unfortunately, you don't get to see the picture of the very dilapidated gazebo. But we do, if you are out there and you've seen some of the gazebo in our picnic building, they look very sad. And so we are going to replace those roofs. It is going to be a complete roof replacement. Because of the damage to the structures underneath the shingles that are currently there. And we will be doing that we are doing metal roofing, which will take us a little bit longer, but it will match the other metal roofs that are already out there. So that'll be coming out soon. So I hope you can see that change as it's happening. Probably the most exciting, and again, I wish I could show you pictures, is our new staff. We have hired a brand new buildings and grounds supervisor to help us again bring our parks back up and get a fresh face on them. So many of you might know Ryan McCarty. He has been on our buildings and grounds crew for 8+ years, and he is now going to be our supervisor. He's very much respected within the community, and he lives in the community, which is an added benefit as well. We also have a new position. It's actually, we have the funding for it. It's a seasonal position, but we are utilizing the seasonal position to help us with volunteer work days. And so Janine Heibel, if you remember, we've recognized her for her outstanding contributions through volunteering. She is our new volunteer coordinator, and she will help us build capacity to do a lot of our invasive species removal, our plantings, and other work days by helping manage work days with volunteers. In fact, this weekend, she and I are leading 40 different Kelvin students during their Street Fest to help remove autumn olive at Peace Park. So we're very excited about that. She is also launching a park stewards program that once a week will be out doing work days at each of our parks to help capture a lot of our retirees and other volunteers that want a more consistent program, but it also gives us the consistency of having a regular workforce. We did another work day this past a couple weeks ago with our fire department, and Chief came out with a couple of his crew, and they helped us remove autumn olive with public volunteers and also all of our buildings and ground. It was a team building exercise between departments, but also with our community. We had about 30 volunteers out there removing autumn olive, and they've made a lot of progress in 2 hours. And then immediately following that, we've had requests, some concerns about erosion. And so we installed the building crew, and I installed 2 erosion water bars. So this will help mitigate the erosion that we have in those steep slopes. And then we have the funding, and we will be the plan for up to 30 water bars. And so we have a plan to do those in order of priority. And last but not, well, actually not last but not least, and then we also continue to work with Kent Conservation District. We've just changed their role. Instead of coming out and doing our work days, which we now can do in-house, and a lot of the manual things that we can now do with volunteers, they're going to be doing our foliar treatment. So these are the follow-up treatments from the other work that they've done in previous years. So things that we can't do with our own staff and volunteers. So you may have been at Burton Park, and I can't remember how many acres, but it's significant. I think it's something like 20 acres at this point that they have treated. And they most recently, this past week, they did a work day with the neighbors and the community, and they volunteered their time to do that. Because again, we all know invasives don't respect property lines. And last but not least, I have this beautiful picture of the Westdale Memorial Park that Stone went in with the permanent memorial. And I hope you get out there because it's a lovely, lovely permanent structure. Any questions?
First of all, I'd like to commend you and your group for all the hard work, but most importantly, engaging the willing residents that can to volunteer. That's what community is all about. Lastly, I heard about the wonderful plantings. I'm assuming that we're within budget, and how much of that heavy laborious work planting the trees was done by our own people versus a contractor?
Well, that's where the cost savings was. That was a big part of the cost savings. One, we chose native plants. And so a lot of our native plant nurseries actually have less expensive plants. So again, we had almost double the number of plants, and we haven't even we're about halfway through the money in the grant. So we are far under budget, which is why we're looking for more trees. And the other cost savings was our staff. Our staff put those in, again, trying to diversify so they're not just mowing. These are highly capable men that love this type of work. And so the staff and I put those in. So in the grant there, we were going to contract that out, and then we were going to hire somebody to oversee it. But since I have that skill set from my previous work, and we obviously have the skilled labor with our crew, we did it in-house. Having said that, also at Tassel Park, where we will be planting many more plants, we have 2 volunteer work days at minimum to have volunteers put those in, because we will be putting in hundreds of plants. And so we want to do that with volunteers because, again, it builds the ownership with our community. Our community wants, they will be rooted, sorry, excuse the pun, rooted within that park, but it's also a great way of cost saving. People love planting. Why pay people to do it?
I think another benefit from your program that you're initiated and you're mentoring is that our employees are probably learning some good, valuable lessons and information that they haven't been tasked with before.
And they are eager to learn. They really are. I just cannot tell you how impressed I have been with our buildings and ground crew. They are hardworking men.
Well, see, that's all part of you being a good leader.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I have.
You're a hardworking woman.
Yeah, Melanie, I just want to say, kind of piggyback on the same thing. Kudos to you and Ryan, and I guess Ted can express that too. I've walked the causeway at the Camelback Bridge probably almost every day, multiple times, ever since it's been built in 2004. And in the last month, I've noticed, geez, it's really seemed to be spritzed up this time. I mean, they just, and it's not just the parks, it's the whole township in general. The building and ground seems to have picked up their game because I visually noticed it. when I was walking across the causeway and I said, man, this looks so much nicer.
Thank you. And it's funny because they come back and they're like, Camelback looks terrible, Melody. Like
I've said the same thing for years. I thought, why can't they? And it looks so much better now. So tell them they really did a great job.
it really is because they feel empowered now. And so they see problems and they take care of it and they take a lot of pride in their work. So I will definitely bring that back to them.
Good. Thank you.
I'm just going to add on as well. Thank you for everything you've done. I just want to say I've been in the community for over 18 years, and I think this summer I have seen more children on their bicycles going over the bridge, Thornapple Bridge, heading to Tassel Park with their little fishing poles holding onto it, heading down there to go fishing, whether with their parents or alone. And I just think that our river is such a huge asset to our community, and to allow a good place, a safe place for them to go and fish is just really impressive. So thank you.
Thank you. And I want to continue to do programs. Maybe we can do music in the parks and other things. I think part of it was an awareness. And I think a lot of that, again, can be given to our new communication coordinator specialist, because he's been doing a great job of getting the message out about Tassel and these other places. So hopefully the word is getting out there and people are going, oh, that's right. We have these places.
We haven't talked about finances and budget and at all. I know you've been working really hard on that. We've been working really hard on it. Is it fair to say that all the stuff that you've done in the last, just over this past summer, has been done on the existing budget? We have not given you any extra money.
No, not at this point. Now, having said that, I'm keeping within budget, but these items were not in the budget. Does that make sense?
I also want to add that I was part of the communication with the previous manager about formulating some sort of budget for the Parks Department, because we did not have a budget prior to this year. The numbers were truly, I feel, really on the low side. They were just guesses, I would say, from Ben of to what he thought the parks had been using in the past. And so again, you're doing a great job. We are noticing a difference when you are spending less money than what was assumed was being used by the parks in previous years, because the Parks Department has traditionally not had a separate budget. And this, I think, is huge.
And this is a new position. It's not an additional employee. It was a realignment that took a lot of internal persuasion. We don't have a community development director where everything, it's unnecessary. So you got rid of, you're not paid as much as him, but you're doing what, like, he oversaw our parks. I wouldn't even say a department. He oversaw the parks. And so it was a realignment. It's not an additional employee, and it's making all the difference. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I do, I do get a little nervous because it's the what I don't know. And it keeps happening where these things were not in the budget. I'm trying to stay within the budget. And then I have a pop-up of, oh, you haven't emptied your septic tank and the toilets are not flushing. Oh,
And the drinking fountain isn't working all that.
these are things that should have been taken care of through regular maintenance, with preventative maintenance, and that we would not have these large bills. Like the roof replacement should not be as large as it is, but because we have to completely replace instead of just repairing, the cost of everything is higher.
Do you know from looking at what you've seen of the numbers, do we have anything set aside for looking to the future acquisition or expansion of our parks? Not that I'm going to look at Ted, not that I know of in this year's budget. It's a loaded question. I know that we don't.
Okay. And again, I am doing my best to understand the budget. It is, things pop up and disappear faster than I can keep track.
And I'll just chime in a little. We were told, and at that point I was on the Parks Committee, and we were told there was going to be some money started to be set aside within the parks budget to accrue to be able to make purchases in the future. And
I will say, and thank you for saying, we do have the Homeyer Fund.
yes, but
We do have, but that is open space, and that is very different than if we get something. I would assume the Homeyer Fund is more for natural areas like Burton and Peace Park. And so other acquisitions that might come up that are not more natural areas or open spaces, those we do not have any funds for.
And that hasn't been growing. That was gifted to by a private party, correct?
Right. And also it is compared to the cost of land in Cascade Township, it is severely insufficient. And
It would buy an average home
no,
in the township.
no, I think your average home in the township is 440,000, if I remember. And we have, I believe, just under 300,000. And again, I apologize. I've only been here 3 months, so if I have those numbers wrong, I apologize.
You're doing a great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time, and I'll see you next week or next meeting.
Thank you.
And thank you, Lulu, for your computer and your attempt to save me.
Article 5, public comments. Now is the time to comment, for the public to comment on anything on tonight's agenda that is not already scheduled for a public hearing. So that means if public would like to comment on the Tuffy lease agreement, the library interior refresh project, the density issue, zoning at Centennial Park, and also the airport commerce district zoning. Those issues are not scheduled for public hearing, so now would be the time to comment on those. The Watermark Cigar Bar is scheduled for its own separate public hearing, so please hold comments back until we get to that issue. With that said, please limit your comment to 3 minutes. State your name and your address for record keeping.
Make sure I heard you correctly. I can comment on the density.
Absolutely.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Tom Tooley. I live at 3455 Charlevoix Drive, approximately less than a half mile from this site that's being considered for the higher density. I've lived in the community for over 12 years in the neighborhood in Centennial. I'm also an architect and have spent over 20 years working on apartment developments. I read through the comments from the previous meeting and also the letters of support, and I concur with those, so I'm not going to go through those. But what I would like to just kind of highlight from my experience is the demographics that we've seen changed in communities and how that's impacted how a community decides to develop tools so they can allow for, in unique situations, to create a higher density. Because we know that the Grand Rapids area is short on housing, just like every community. And we know that the cost of housing and the interest rate is driving young people, young families into the rental product. We also have seen over the years empty nesters moving from a big home to a smaller home, something that has more country club like, amenities. So we see this all the time in our developments, and we work for probably a dozen developers across the state of Michigan. The other thing that Cascade is desired for its location, for its amenities, its trails, its parks, and also for the schools, because there isn't a lot of rental in this area. I've been hiring staff for over 20 years, and a lot of the people that I've hired grew up here, wanted to come back. Or I've also hired people that lived elsewhere and wanted to live in Grand Rapids. Now, the other thing that happens is when a young family moves here with their kids, I've even seen grandparents, and I've talked to grandparents that have moved here because their grandkids are here. So we're seeing that all across all of our developments. I was involved with the Ridges of Cascade. Our company was years ago, and I live directly adjacent. I look out my back window and I look upon that. I think it's a beautiful project. I love to see the families and the energy that it's brought. They had the same concerns, traffic, noise, all of that stuff. But you don't see that. What we see is the vibrance. We see more people walking. I see the young kids waiting for the bus, in the morning to go to school. Recently, we're finishing up the Village East in Ada,
30 seconds.
which I've also been involved in. And we spent over 6 months with the township working through to increase that density. It was originally planned to be like a single family home. But through our conversations, I think the township came to the realization, we've invested in this retail. We want this retail to succeed. And what you need with that is people, and you need density. Now, I think this site is a bit of a unicorn for me because It's not an ideal single-family home site. It's an ideal, as it was shown in the overlay for Centennial Park, as a potential for a higher density.
Thank you,
And-
sir.
I did it. Okay. I got close. Thank you.
You did great. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Tom Richardson. I live at 3438 North Applecrest Court. I'm also here to talk about the density amendment. I'm a mathematician, not an architect, so I don't have the professional expertise of the previous speaker, but I have the same sort of points that he made. I want to read some pieces from the master plan. So one item there is to permit attached residential infill, including retirement housing, near transit stops, services along existing or planned pathways, and within walking distance of Cascade Village. Second item, study the feasibility of permitting accessory dwelling units in zoning districts that permit single-family dwellings. Another action is install public water and sanitary sewer into areas of the township consistent with utility plans. 83 survey respondents indicated they are very concerned or somewhat concerned with groundwater quality. Another action is to increase residential density where water and sewer are present to encourage, alternative modes and reduce inefficient sprawl. So I totally get that people appreciate open space and green space in Cascade. I do, but high density is not the enemy of open space and green space. High density everywhere in the township wouldn't make sense, but if you target it to the areas that have infrastructure that can support higher density, then you reduce the pressure to build out the agricultural and green space zones. If the only place you can build in the township is the agricultural zone, pretty soon you won't have an agricultural zone. So I think to maintain the natural character that's a real feature of the township, I think we should support our density. Now, is 12 units an acre actually a good maximum density? I don't know. I'm not the expert on that, but I don't see a reason to put a hard number on it. The current ordinance says that it's a special use. So I'm not a lawyer, but I think that means that you still have to approve the plans. It's not an automatic right to go and build. So I think that this ordinance would unnecessarily restrict the township's options. And finally, just to repeat one point, there definitely is a housing shortage. And why would we want to make it harder to add more housing or build more housing when we have a shortage? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Supervisor and Trustees. My name is David Calden. I'm an attorney with Varnum LLP.
Sir, you called in? I never worked with you, but you represented us, right?
I did work for the township many years ago. Yes, ma'am.
But up until recently, you were the property, right? Until we switched law firms?
I did work for the township through 2020.
No longer went with Varnum?
I worked on zoning matters occasionally. Yes.
Yeah, you were the top two, you and I can't remember his name, Mr. Huff?
John Huff was the township attorney, correct?
Right. I just remember seeing the zoning and property issues were really where the work was at. I never met you, but I saw your name on a lot of things. So
It's nice to meet you.
nice to meet you in person.
Yeah.
So you used to represent us and the airport. Now you just represent the airport?
We represent the airport, yes.
Okay. Welcome.
Correct. And I'm here tonight on behalf of the airport, actually. So I wanted to really, I think, the township and the airport have enjoyed a long history of cooperation and communication and a long cooperative relationship. And really, it's in that spirit that I'm here tonight. And the authority submitted a letter to you regarding a zoning amendment that you have on your agenda for tonight. That letter is regarding the Airport Commerce District, and it expresses some information that we hope the board will take into consideration before acting on the amendment, given that, of course, it affects authority-owned property. I know you have a large packet tonight, but I'll just quickly summarize the letter. some points I hope you'll take into consideration in case you haven't had a chance to get through it. Prior to the township amending its master plan, the authority advised the township that state law requires the master plan to incorporate the airport's planning documents, specifically the airport approach plan and the airport layout plan. Unfortunately, the township did not incorporate those documents into the master plan when it was recently amended. And the township is now considering a zoning ordinance amendment again tonight that affects the airport that is supposed to be, per statute, based upon that master plan. So because the master plan doesn't include those documents at present, it would be our request that that document is first corrected before an ordinance based on that plan is adopted. Additionally, the ordinance amendment is not consistent with the airport's planning documents, and state law provides that a township ordinance amendment shall not increase any inconsistency that may exist between the zoning ordinance and the airport's planning documents. And finally, the ordinance amendment is not consistent with the Regional Airport Authorities Act, which is referred to in the letter as Act 95, which grants the authority certain exclusive planning and zoning powers relative to airport property. And so for all of those reasons, we would very respectfully ask the township not adopt the amendment tonight, instead refer it back to staff and council to resolve the issues that I just discussed. And again, more than happy to work cooperatively to try to do that.
30 seconds.
As was done the last time the township adopted the zoning ordinance affecting the airport. Thank you.
Did you represent the township when that last, did Varnum represent them?
I did not, and no, Varnum did not work on that. No, ma'am. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And our attorney is here and has reviewed that extensively. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Anyone else? Is there anyone online?
Scott Van Salkema, I'm going
Wait a
to.
minute, time out. Mr. Cauldron, did you write the opinion about the planning commission appointments? You did. No, you should remember that. It was when I was the new supervisor. That was your name, correct?
Well,
No, you know, it's easy. You'll remember it.
Madam Supervisor, I really can't comment on privileged information.
Why is that privilege? It's between us. You wrote that article, that
Actually, the
opinion.
privilege is the townships, and the board would have to waive privilege.
Okay, so, but I remember it was your name on that planning commission appointment memos, both of them.
I'm not really sure how that's relevant, but
It's very relevant. The planning commission's deciding this issue, that was yours. And again, we didn't go with your opinion. We went with our special counsel's attorney. Wow, thank you. I appreciate it. Got it.
thank you, Madam Supervisor.
That's the reason why we do conflicts of interest. It helps. I cannot believe that was you who authored those on our behalf. All right, anyone publicly online?
Yes, I'm going to unmute Scott Van Salkema.
That's wrong.
Hi there.
That's wrong.
Hello, Scott Van Salkman, 2570 Orange again. Calling regarding about the Tuffy lease, and it's not so much about the Tuffy, but about the other property that is owned by the township that's behind it. That little house that's there, that's chained up and everything. And again, I don't know obviously the condition of the home or anything like that, but is there any way that the township perhaps could maybe look at maybe renting that out and get some money for the next 8 years if you guys go along with the Tuffy? I'm assuming you're not going to do anything to that home until Tuffy is vacated, and then obviously do some sort of a park project, all encompassing all at once. But in the meantime, maybe a small business or somebody like that would want to use that home for office, as it may have been looked like it may have been set up as an office before, instead of just letting it deteriorate for the next 8 years and get no taxable income. Just a little thought I thought of, seeing how that the Tuffy was on the order here, and it looks like another company wants to come in and take that over for perhaps another eight or 9 years. So just something to think about and consider, seeing how it's just sitting there. But thank you.
Thank you.
Just a response to that. Looking through, when we're going through budget amendments, there is money in our budget to tear down that house, which is what the plan is. And it is budgeted for this year. So that will be taken care of. I talked to Ted Friday about it, and I think he's communicated with Melanie as well. And we're working on getting some bids for that and getting it taken care of and getting that torn down. So that's the answer to that.
It's referred to as the old doctor's house.
I just knew the address. I Googled it to see why it was in the budget, and that's where it took me. And we had a conversation Friday, and Melanie and you are working on it. Thank you.
Mhm.
And Wendy, not to make us go on and on, but there's also FERC requirements, federal energy regulation requirements because of the dam. So there are some real limitations as to what can be done with that.
And
And
we need to tear it down.
I agree. I agree to that, but there's also other federal regulations that we have to abide by. So
Exactly.
Anyone else?
Comment. So from Mr. Van Salkema.
Okay, well, that's good to know. I'm assuming then, would then there be any new park additions, or is it just gonna be left over as a blank, empty slate of
More to come.
just gravel or dirt? But okay,
More to come.
great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you. Article 6, approval of the consent agenda.
motion to approve.
Support.
That's a motion by trustee Kessel, supported by treasurer Corstange to approve the consent agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Financial actions, Article 7, Manager Andrzejewski. You want to walk us through some of the additions or changes?
The June and July financial statements are pretty standard things that the Board of Trustees sees and approves every month. Same thing with the payable. I'm going to talk about a little bit more about the next two. The item D is approval of mid-year budget amendments. Working with Liz, and we went through with all the department managers, their budget line by line by line. And what are called budget amendments for the public to know, those are things that you can move around within a department. Let's just say one line has more money than they need, but another one right below it has less money than they need. You can move money around within departments. Those are called budget amendments. So what you see before you are budget amendments. Nothing on that report is major. They're all smaller things that need to be done. And by doing them now, you will save yourselves a lot of work at the end of the year. In the past here, it's been done at the end of the year. Everything kind of piles in at the end of the year. This way you'll get all of them approved and done now. And you won't have as many, if any, at the end of the year. And again, this, I don't want to call it a formality, but it's adjusting things around within a department, not between departments, so that everything works out and everything balances out. So that's item D, which is consider approval of mid-year budget amendments. Liz is also out there in Zoom land in case you have any questions for her.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment that you and Liz and Oksana as well have done a really great job with this and bringing this to the Personnel and Finance Committee for us to look at as well. And then also making a few small changes, not so much change, but I guess changes to the way, the way it looks, which included adding the fund balances underneath every different department, so we could see kind of where things are at. I think one example, especially when we have residents looking at this, was the Pathways Fund. It looked like there was a huge negative. It's like $1.4 million. If you looked at this year's budget, that was the final. And we had that money sitting in the fund that from previous years that we've been saving to do these improvements. So we wanted to really make sure that when residents were looking at this, they could see kind of where that money is coming from. So if it looks like it's a negative, there's money in the fund balance that's been sitting there previously to pay for the things that were completed this year. We're not, going in the negative for things that we are doing within the township, which I think is really important for people to see. I also think that this is a first step for where we're trying to get within the Personnel and Finance subcommittee to be able to be much more transparent with our financials to the residents within the township. And there's a few more things that I think we're going to be able to do. And then we're going to try to work with our communication specialist to get things prettied up and posted on the website so that residents can see exactly where we're at. I think that that's always been a big concern for residents within the community. And I think we're being very transparent. And I just want to thank both you, Liz, and Oksana for all of your work on this. You guys did a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to address that in my manager's report, but I'll spend a couple of minutes now. What the public out there should know is we have a finance and personnel meeting every other week with 3 members of the trustees. They've been very vocal and very good about asking for explanations about different categories, different amounts of money, where this is going, where that's going. And again, I don't do a lot of commending, but I will commend you all for doing your due diligence and making sure the money and the funds are looked over so that everything for the public's knowledge is good, so that they have somebody looking over the items. I had prepared a couple of things you didn't ask me, but I'll just mention them here because I thought you would. My overall discussion with that committee and to the public is let you know the township is in good financial shape. I would say between good and very good. We have a budget surplus right now. It's called a fund balance, but it's money that accumulates because you keep your expenses and revenues under control. We have a budget surplus now of $8,122,000. Sounds like a lot of money, but when you consider that expenses for 1 year are $5 million, what usually the state of Michigan or any state will say is a good city in good financial shape, or township in this case, should have at least 1 year's expenses covered by your fund balance. We have a little over 1 year, so that's a good thing for the township and a good thing for the board and their oversight. You might see there's a big balance in the police department of $2 million, but of course that's going to be used in the next few months to pay for the rest of the construction and finishing of the fire department. I meant fire department. Open space was brought up. There's $811,000 balance for the bond, but we have a $300,000 payment due again this year. So that leaves about $500,000 in there, which can be used for open space purchases of land or parks. Not nearly enough for what the costs in this township are for land, but you have a little bit in there. Those were the biggest ones. That we have money in the library, $2,300,000. A lot of that's going to be used for renovations and things that are coming up. So my message to the board members, and it is to the public and the board tonight, is this township is in good financial shape, thanks to the stewardship of all these people here, thanks to the oversight of those people, and thanks to the staff when we had our budget meetings, that they were very precise and very forthcoming of where their budgets are, where they stand, and what we have to do for the rest of the year. So that is mid-year budget amendments. Last item is item E, and this was a request of Trustee Shipley. I didn't realize we weren't doing this all along, because in every township city I've been in, we've been doing this. So as of tonight, the trustees will have before them all the accounts payable. In other words, all the checks we're going to cut and pay the vendors for work done, services, products, ordered, etc. So they have a chance. We gave it to them on Friday and Monday. They have a chance to look over the accounts payable, and they have a chance to submit questions to me or the staff before the meeting if they have anything, or even if something comes up at the meeting. But now we have two sets of eyes on it. Actually, three, because Liz looks over the accounts payable. I get a report on our BSNA software. I look over the accounts payable. If anything looks out of whack to me, I call the department head and we ask for an explanation of what they bought or what services were given to us. And now we have a third set of eyes looking over the accounts payable. So every 2 weeks, this board will get a listing of accounts payable. They will approve it. And then tomorrow, only after they approve it, will we cut the checks. In the past here, it was done, the checks were cut before approval. It may sound like a technicality. It is, but it should be done where they approve it and then we pay. So that's being corrected tonight, Trustee Shipley. Now, you've got a lot of stuff in front of you. We don't have to give you the $10 items. So this is an evolving process. If trustees come to us and say, we only want to oversee, we want everything, but we want to oversee thoroughly over this dollar amount, we can do that. But tonight we gave you everything. Okay.
Yeah, I personally, I think everything is fine, but I think that some people might skim through and only look at the high dollar amount, which is fine, but I just feel like it's our responsibility to look at them.
That's what I do. There's no dollar amount small enough that I don't look at.
Yeah, that's what I.
Okay.
The other piece, which I had talked to Liz earlier today, and she sent me a report on, is just to know what account they're being charged to. The generic report we got was just a list of checks. It didn't tell us where they're
Oh,
going.
where's the department?
Yeah, and I just think that's helpful, because I think a lot of my questions easily have been answered when we what department they were in, because then I'm like, oh, that makes sense for that department.
Yeah.
She
knows the numbers. But you
I
don't
know,
the numbers.
I have
Yeah.
to pull up my list and cross-reference the list, but yeah, that was my only comment with it. I don't know if anybody else has any other comments with the checklist.
Well, are we gonna take these, A, B, and C, and then I've got some questions, when we get to the last two, but are you gonna approve all of the financial actions as one or what?
Well, in the past, we just blanket approved them without talking about it. So we can
Okay.
do either way.
So I'll ask my questions then. On the budget amendments, I went through them all. The only thing, and this was the first attempt, to do it, is when we get to the something like contractual services and we say reappropriate funds. I guess what I'd like to know is what contractual services, and for example, I'm looking at 802,000, and I can see what we budgeted and I can see what we spent, and I can see where we're anticipating more of a budget there.
Liz, are you out there? I will use an example of contractual services, our health insurance, our dental insurance, our vision insurance. They're paid once a year. So when someone looks at those particular items earlier in the year, they may see a huge amount of money and say, where are you going to spend all this money? And then when the bills are paid, it all goes away in one swoop. So contractual services, Liz, if you can chirp in here, can you give me some
No,
examples?
I don't need an example. I just, I think everything is fine for tonight. I just think in the future, maybe noting what they are for.
Fire fund. I think that's what, I didn't know what department you were under, so.
And there's another one, $176,000 reappropriation, and that's under reimbursement from building department, and it says 132,000 for 2020 and 21 and 22.
Okay, those.
That's an important thing to talk about, maybe.
Okay,
Yeah.
Those are,
That hasn't been ever talked about in the past.
yeah, those are transfers that should have been done the last 2 years, and now it's a catch-up. That's why you see 3 of them there. Therefore, services that. Let me remember.
The fire department
Fire
did,
department-
that were billed under
Nice, yeah.
building department. And the fire department was not reimbursed for those services that they provided. So that is a catch up for the last 2 years plus this year, for
Right.
the amount that was paid back to the fire department.
But I think I understand what you mean. You would like a little bit more detail if it's contractual services, what is the service and what department it goes to.
Yeah, most of them were clear and understanding, but some of them just maybe a little more clarification in the future.
I really appreciate the amount of detail compared to what we used to get in the explanation. It's night and day.
That's what I was just gonna say. I think that this is way more detailed than I've ever seen presented at the 100th hour at the end of the year for budget amendments to the board. So I just think you guys are doing a great job.
Great job.
We can work on making some more,
It's
the
evolved.
example or the detail a little more,
No, it's light years ahead of where we've been
way
under past
more
leadership.
what has happened in the past.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And again, these are adjustments within departments. So in the end, everything balances out in all the departments so that we saw are all within budget.
I
Thank
just have one more thing. Ted, can you clarify or explain how the process has been tightened with the POs and the verifications?
And then for
I think that's
managers
later
report.
on.
Okay, we can wait for that.
That's later on.
Thank you.
It's in my manager's report.
Okay, thank you.
Then I'll make a motion to approve the financial actions, Article 7.
Support.
It's a motion by trustee Kessel, supported by treasurer Corstange to approve Article 7's financial actions. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Having no unfinished business, we'll move on to Article 9, item 069-2023. Consider the approval of a Tuffy lease assignment offer. Mr. Hogan from our new law firm, Foster Swift, not new anymore, but welcome and thank you for coming.
Thank you. As you know, the township owns the real property at 6896. It's a Tuffy. The township leases it to Tuffy. The remaining term is 9 years, so it expires February 28, 2032. To remind you, some months ago, a potential buyer of the Tuffy assets came to us and said, we'd like to purchase the assets of Tuffy and get an assignment of the lease. The board directed me to go talk to Tuffy's, the buyer's attorney, and find out if they would be willing to shorten the term of the lease. I talked to them. They said no. And before I could come back to the board, that buyer withdrew its offer. So it was moot. So I didn't have to come back to the board on it. Maybe a month or less ago, I was approached by an attorney for the new buyer, a new proposed buyer of the Tuffy assets, and saying, hey, we'd like the township to consent to an assignment. I said, well, are you willing to shorten the term of it? And they're willing to shorten it to 8 years from the existing 9. So it would expire February 28 of 2031. So I'm basically cutting a year off the remaining term of the lease. I've seen financial statements from the buyer that I just got today, and those look okay. That's one of the requirements that they're supposed to provide to the township. The potential buyer is called Awesome Tires LLC. The owner of that company is here, as is the agent, as is his attorney. So they're all here tonight as well to see what happens. As noted in the agenda, the buyer's lender will not agree to finance the deal for any term less than 8 years. When I said the financial statements look okay, I should say, well, it's my untrained eye. I'm a real estate lawyer, not a financial expert, but it looked okay. Because this is in connection with an asset sale, the township can grant or withhold its consent in its sole discretion. If this was a stock sale, then the lease says that the township can withhold or grant its consent reasonably. So that's a reasonable standard, but this is an asset sale. So they're asking the township to consent, and it's in the township's sole discretion.
Mr. Hogan, can you walk us through, we've heard it before when it came up, when there was another potential buyer, but what does the lease say and what does it allow us to do? And how is it related to this ask?
Any assignment of the lease to a buyer of the assets is subject to the approval of the township board. And that approval can be, like I said, withheld or granted in the sole discretion of the township. So you can say you're not going to consent to an assignment for any reason, for no reason. It's within your discretion. If it was reasonable discretion, which is not the standard here, then we'd have to do a little more talking about, is this a good deal or not? The township can also require, the owner of the buyer to give a personal guarantee of the lease. So that's, something else we could ask for.
So right now with the current owner who's in or occupier of the building, we purchased the building, that the person or the entity we bought it from has the ability to stay there for 9 years. And then if he or she wants to transfer that to a new third party, at that point, the township has the ability to either agree to it or for any reason, no, and take back the property. Is that right?
The township cannot take back the property.
Sorry, terminate the lease, right? The lease applies to that particular owner, but it's up to the township's sole discretion whether or not we agree to enter into it, transfer that to a new.
That's correct. So if the township said no to the assignment, the lease would just continue with the current tenant for the remaining 9 years.
Or he can terminate it if he wants to, right? I
Yes.
mean, he may decide not to stay there for 9 years.
Well, I think that the township would have to agree to that. I don't think it's in the discretion of the tenant to do that, but that's a possibility,
Well,
yes.
I, for one, would like it sooner than later.
And so basically, I just need some direction as to what to convey to the potential buyer of these assets.
I have a question. I know that when we bought the property, we had a contamination review done and it was surprisingly clean.
Mhm.
No contamination in the soil or surrounding water, et cetera. And I have no reason to believe that will happen if we transfer the lease to the new leasee. But who's responsible for any catastrophic happening, whether it's contamination to the groundwater during the next 7 years, or if it's a liability issue, because let's say all of a sudden there was an explosion of the building and it wiped out 4 buildings around it. Whose responsibility is that?
The tenants?
Okay.
The tenant, if anything happens. So whatever tenant it is, it's that tenant's responsibility. I'm sure, while representing the buyer, if the township approved the lease assignment, if I'm representing the buyer, I'm going to for sure get an environmental study done before I close on the sale, on the purchase. But as of right now, if something catastrophic happens, that's on the tenant.
Okay. Thank you.
I don't think the contamination was clean. I think it was contaminated. And I don't think we did a BEA at the time when we bought that, but I think there was contamination in the soil, if I remember. And yeah, you're right. The owner would be responsible for any cleanup. If a BEA is done when they sell it to somebody, if we do, then any future contamination beyond the BEA would be the buyer's responsibility.
So we're talking lease transfer, that we own the building, right?
You own the building, you will still own the building. We weren't on the job in 2019, I think, when the township bought it, so I haven't seen environmental work on it. I don't know the status of the
And
environmental.
if we bought it, we'd probably just tear it down so we wouldn't have to worry about future cleanup, I think.
Mr. Hogan, the township obviously bought that building for the eventual benefit of the residents to extend riverfront property. So we didn't want to stick it to the owner at the time. So we allowed it to lease them to lease the building from us for their business. How soon though can we get out of that lease at the very earliest? Is it the 9 years? Or I thought there were some contingencies in there that we could buy out the business for so much faster, no?
No.
Okay. So what's the fastest that we could take over the property?
Absent a default, it would be 9 years, so.
Or upon the transfer.
Or upon the train?
8 years.
I thought there were 5-year renewals
That's what I thought.
on that.
Yes, but they exercised the 2 extensions in 1 letter, and we've taken the position that it's likely that if the township were to fight with the current tenant about whether they can extend it just 1 5-year or 2 5 years, that's a litigation question that we're assuming we should go with the 9-year period, and it has been extended 2 5-year periods. Without getting into any, in this a public discussion about.
What was the reason we didn't do it last time? Was it the dollars weren't right?
The potential party who wanted to transfer the lease backed out on their own.
Yeah.
So there's really no risk? Is there risk for us as the owner to transfer this?
Well, you're consenting to an assignment of the lease. And the term would be reduced to 8 years. It's not a risk to consent, and I don't believe it's a risk to not consent to the assignment. of the lease.
Okay.
So if he wants to assign the lease, he must not want to run it anymore, or he would not be interested in assigning the lease. He'd probably just stay there and exercise his 9 years. So if we don't agree to the assignment, he may want to terminate earlier, which we may be receptive to allowing him to do so that we can get the property, like Tom said, and use it for development.
Currently, that's bringing in about 77,000 in rent
I think it's 111 or
well,
113.
per year.
Yeah, I think so. That's at least what was on the budget.
And do you know where that goes?
Yeah, it's returning the debt,
No, it goes to the DDA.
but there's a mortgage on the property with United Bank, I think. I can't remember the amount of the mortgage. So we've got that mortgage to pay off. And I think the DDA must be using the money to pay it off because it's not debt free.
The DDA hasn't had any involvement in the budget and payment. They relied on Manager Swayze and the former Personnel Finance Committee for all of that.
Mr. Banker, I don't think that mortgage company is gonna let you tear that building down until it's paid off.
I don't.
Yeah.
We would have to pay it off. Yeah. It's
So,
collateral.
it would
have
be
the money.
nice to know before we
Make a
talk about
decision.
this, is to know what the balance is that we owe.
How much do we,
Yeah.
how much would we have to pay off?
And I don't remember what it is.
So 8 years at over 100,000 coming in with no liabilities to repair the building or any of that nature. That's a lot of money to say no to at this.
Well, yeah.
So I think we ought to look at it a little deeper.
I have come into this from the outside. Okay. My 2 cents are agreeing with Timmy, really, before he said it. You have $100,000 coming in every year for the next, it'll be 8 years. That's $800,000. You don't have any responsibility for repairs, right? The tenant does the repairs?
Correct.
Okay. You pay off the building, then it's debt free, and then you can tear it down.
But yes, perhaps, before we jump into a new
Yeah,
deal.
this is my 2 cents.
Right, but this parcel, just to piggyback on what Trustee McDonald said, this parcel, we have debts right now, the township on the Peace Park that we're still paying off. We have it's to the DDA's benefit to protect their independence from like people coming after that, to have some form of debt, even though we have the ability to pay it off right now at the DDA, or the DDA has that. That's according to Manager Swayze, because otherwise they can come in and try to, take back some of those funds, the county or whoever. So it's a complicated financial issue as far like we have debt. As far as this particular parcel, though, this was a strategic purchase by the township because of its location. This tuffy on the corner is the heart of any proposed village. And it's adjacent because it's next to the river. It's next to the park. It's next to the pedestrian bridge that we're building next spring that comes into the village for bikers and walkers. And just by voluntarily locking us, the township, into a new 8-year lease, I'm just concerned that we're effectively tying the hands of the next 2 boards unnecessarily. So if we want to dig into a cost benefit analysis of how much debt the township should carry, great. But we're not landlords, and this was the highest priority in the strategic plan. So
Can I ask you a question?
Mhm.
Sure. If the current tenant stays there and he decides I can't make a go of this business, what are his options?
His options are to reach, well, he can just walk away and still be liable for the rent.
Okay, and that'll be up to us to go after.
Go
him again.
to a victim, to go after him for a judgment.
Or just take possession.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
I'm just trying to, yeah, go ahead.
So that's an option, you know, some eviction litigation, or we reach an agreement with the current tenant saying, all right, you can get out.
Pay us this amount of money.
Yeah.
Okay, now,
Mhm.
if we assign the lease to a new tenant, what are our options?
Well, I mean, there's always those options if there's a default, or if they decided they want it out. I mean, those options
Same
are still available. Yes.
Or if we give it to the new tenant, then they have it for 8 years.
Yes.
Okay,
And right now we have a tenant who already he was paid. We bought that property from him, correct? He sold us the property and now it's like when you sell your house, but you rent it back for a little bit while you're looking for this property. And now we are leasing it back to him to stay for a certain amount of period, but it was purchased because we want to take possession of that for a park.
I'm not sure if it was purchased from him. I know it was from a corporation with a
Corporate,
different
sorry,
name, but
the
I don't,
corporation.
but I don't know
I
his
just-
relationship to that.
Just think that for clarity, I think Wendy is going down this path too. We're trying to make a decision and we're not sure, are we making $70,000 a year? Are we making 110, 11,000 a year?
Just
What is
double
the-
check that number.
No, what-
78,000.
Oh, 78, that's what I thought. Okay, so, because 70 something stuck in my
I
head.
just looked at it.
And then how much do we owe on it?
Right.
And that's what we, you know, if we don't know, I mean, if we owe 400,000, that's different than if we owe 1 million. So I mean, it's just nice to have those facts.
What's the balance in the
Yeah,
DDA?
what's
2 or 3 million?
the
2.6.
DDA is 2,624,000.
So we could,
Yeah, I just want to make sure we know that it's, how much do we owe on that? What's
Why
the
don't we
balance?
do this? Why don't we table it until we get all the facts and then deal with it later? Because I think the mortgage originally was 500,000. We put some cash with it. I think United Bank financed it. I think we're using the rental income to
Pay it off.
retire that debt. But I can't remember, and it's been a while ago. So we're, rather than voting on something to extend or not extend, why don't we table it until we get all that information and we have it in front of us and know exactly what is owed on that debt.
I think the real estate attorney handling it on behalf of the township is sitting right in the audience tonight. I know he didn't prepare behind the scenes,
But
but
he's the agent for it. I mean, he says he can tell you about the history of the purchase if that's,
No, we just want to know what do we owe?
we're
Yeah,
just
what do
looking
we-
for dollar
I don't
amounts.
know.
And
That's okay. You're just coming.
I just have a comment that, if we're at $78,000 a year rent coming in with no liabilities on that, with the CPI increase every year over the next 8 years, we're still looking at over $800,000 coming in, and then we get the building back at the end of that lease. I think it's something to look at. Patience is what I'm saying. You'll get the building. It's in the lease. But I'm good at getting the 800,000 too.
624,
Well, there's CPI increases every year.
fine.
But do we know for a fact what the balance is that we owe? That's what we need. If it's 500, it's one story. If it's 1 million, it's another story.
no, I think it started out at 500, Tom, the balance, I think, if I remember it. I don't know what's paid down to now.
Do you remember what year we purchased the property?
I think it was 800.
Was it, no, wasn't it 2019?
Yes.
We bought it?
Sounds right.
That's my understanding. It was 2019.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
You have, sir, well, if you want to add anything briefly.
Yes, if I could, thank you. Todd Shaw. My history with the property goes back to when it was Mike Kunis's body shop that far back. So a couple things I want to clarify. It is not a new 8-year lease. It is an existing 9-year lease shortened to 8 years.
Right, but I'm just saying for us, it would be with a new the new partnership, and that would take away our ability, in theory, the agreement to voluntarily take it back for any reason upon a transfer.
Well,
Is the agreement we have with the current Tuffy owner, not with your new client?
If you, Scott can clarify this or confirm it. If you say, no, we do not want to approve the assignment because it's an asset deal, as Scott mentioned, then the 9-year lease stays in place. then the buyer needs to assess, do I want to do a stock sale instead, which has a different bar for the township to consider a reasonableness piece. The background on the 8-year proposal was, I'm aware, and I think you mentioned it, that the township would rather have the property sooner than later. And I'm also aware that Scott had previous discussion with the previous purchaser about possibility shortening the term. So buyer's counsel would prefer to do an asset deal. And I called Scott up and I said, the simple path would be an asset deal. Township approve it. I'm aware the township would rather have the property sooner than later. So as a carrot, we'll shorten the lease.
Can you make the carrot more attractive?
Well, as Scott touched on, I got a hold of the buyer's lender and I said, here's the conversations, but I realize you have the gold, so to speak. So we can make whatever deal we want, but as somebody said, Mr. Banker needs to approve it. And Mr. Banker said, I can't get on board with anything less than 8 years. So that's the background of the 8 years. To the ownership, gentleman that purchased property from Mike Kunis was a guy by the name of John Root. At some point, he became partners with a guy by the name of Jay Farland, current owner. Jay has been struggling with cancer and is not in good shape right now, which is why he's selling the businesses. The township bought the property from John Root's widow, Jackie Root. John was killed, a tree branch fell off and hit his truck and he was killed. So Jay bought his interest from Jackie Root. Jackie retained the real estate, leased it to Jay, and then the township bought the real estate from Jackie Root, John Root's widow. So that's kind of the mechanics on that. But I think the piece that we're looking at is if you as a township say, you know what, we don't want to approve it, then we'll probably come back with a stock purchase. And then you've got the same decision to make, but the reasonableness discussion going on. And we are trying to address township's interest in getting the property sooner than later.
I just don't see how it's giving us much of an incentive.
Well, you're reducing the term. If you don't think it's enough, I mean, you guys got to do what you got to do, but I heard you'd rather get it sooner than later. So it's a year sooner. And that was all we could give based on what the banker would agree to.
Then you guys still have to analyze whether or not a stock sale works on your end and whether it's worth it.
Well, the business is viable and the intent is to continue to operate the business. So if this deal wasn't approved, it's not like the business will close. It's not like if there's a stock sale, the business will close. It'll operate for the term of the lease until we can find alternative property, knowing that that will eventually be happening.
And this was looked at, a potential stock sale was looked at the last time this was in front of the board, right? And at that point, the potential buyer fell through.
That was an asset deal as well. Yeah.
I thought you just said the last one was this.
No, the last one was a potential.
Okay.
And this was initially brought up as a stock sale, but then it was actually turned into a potential stock sale, but it was actually an asset, right? I mean, the initial, where you were approached.
When I talked to them about it, it was an asset sale, but we went over the stock sale, asset sale differences.
Mm-hmm.
So asset sale, sole discretion, stock sale, reasonable discretion.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I get it. Thank you. Something will have to wait.
The last stock sale then. Okay, never mind. I'll stop asking questions.
That's fine.
No, that's wonderful. Thanks for bringing it to our attention.
Mm-hmm.
The second time in what?
5 months.
So just to be clear, if I can ask one more question. So Scott, if we would have to, okay, if we approve the lease assignment, then we know it's going to be 8 years and we saw these, terms which were attractive where they said, they're going to improve the brand by repairing the building, removing weeds, repairing, et cetera. And that's a good thing. But so we could go that route to 8 years. If we said, no, we don't approve the assignment of the lease, obviously the current owner of the business can continue to exercise the lease for 9 years. But, right? So
Yes. Yep.
But
yes.
at the end of 9 years, then we would probably have collected enough money at $78,000 a year to pay off what the bank of what we owe for the building. Correct?
I don't know what you owe on the building, but yes,
Rough.
but you're collecting money for sure.
But the point is that that balance will go down.
Yes, absolutely.
But now let me go this. If the current
Exactly.
owner
We
of the
don't know
business
that.
is operating,
We don't know what that,
Just
that's an
to
assumption.
clarify,
Yeah, we don't know.
Don't know we're using that money
We're-
to pay down the balance
I
But-
guess it's-
yeah, but it's going into the
And the
township's
DBA
coffers.
doesn't know that.
somewhere.
So I guess my question is, if we said, no, we didn't want to sign a lease and in 4 years, the current manager of the business, owner of the business said, township, I want to get out of this. Then does that become the stock sale? Well, how would we have to pay? We'd have to pay off the bank and pay for the rest of the business.
The township wouldn't have to pay for the business.
Okay.
If in 4 years, the current tenant said, I'm in bad health, I'm out.
Then we just have to pay off what we owe the bank.
Yes.
Okay. And that's the number we're looking for.
Or
Gotcha.
mutual
Wanna make sure.
agreement to cancel. the
Or it could be a mutual agreement. I mean, there's a number of scenarios there, but the township would have to agree to let him out of it.
So next steps,
I have one more question.
Yep.
Just, this is your professional opinion.
Mhm.
When we've talked about a reasonable reduction in the lease, if it is the stock sale, right? That's what our agreement is.
Our agreement is that approving an assignment of that lease is subject to the reasonable discretion of the township,
Okay.
which is a
So
fuzzy
the other,
standard.
like if we don't agree to this, then it's the other one where we would have to agree to, we can reasonably reduce the lease. You said.
or reasonably refuse to transfer it, but it's got to,
Got to be reasonable. I mean,
how do you define reasonable?
That was going to be what's your professional opinion of reasonable reduction of this lease? Because to
This is
me,
gonna be good.
1 year isn't.
And if you can give us this answer, you're pretty much the most sought after attorney in the state of Michigan. So we already knew you guys were good, but
There wouldn't be a reduction.
there would not necessarily be a reduction. I mean, would it be reasonable to ask for it? That's not an unreasonable
but it's
request.
whether or
but
not our withholding of that or not, our refusal to agree to it is reasonable.
it would
What is the
depend-
reasonable
It would depend
standard?
on the potential buyer's financial viability, what they plan to do with it there. I mean, if they intended to like vastly increase what they do there or change it, maybe it would be reasonable to say, no, we're not going to do that. I mean, I don't want to commit us to something too far ahead of time. If they're very weak financially, I mean, it'd be reasonable to say, no, we're not going to agree to that. If they're like the old buyer was Mavis Tire, who was a giant corporation with thousands of Tuffy stores. Well, hard to tell them, it's unreasonable to have a lease assignment in that situation. This is a smaller operation. You've got 2 other stores.
Is it reasonable when making our determination to take into account other factors besides the financial viability of this potential new lessee?
Yes.
So it's reasonable to consider other things
Oh, sure.
in addition to that.
Mhm.
Would it be reasonable to consider maybe the intent about the original intent behind what the language was there for in the first place?
Yes.
So
I mean, reasonable is a pretty broad,
it's clear as mud.
vague standard.
People have different opinions. 'Cause that-
Yeah.
Right. It depends which side you're on as to what's reasonable.
Well, we look forward to being reasonable. Thank you.
That's right.
And what do you want from us as far as,
Well, I just want to ask, going back to Wendy and Jim, are we going to table this until we find out exactly what the balance is?
I would like to, unless you guys have different.
I think that's the best thing to do because.
do we table it or do we just say under these circumstances, we're not going to agree to it, but feel free to come back in the future with additional information?
I'll make a motion to table. We'll see if it gets support.
I'll support.
That's a motion by trustee Kessel to table this issue, supported by treasurer Corstange. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much, Mr. Hogan.
Thank you.
Item 070-2023, approval of the design selection request for proposals for the library interior update. Welcome, Engineer Thorne. Thank you for speaking to us, and also Ms. Brown on behalf of Kent District Library.
Yeah, I'll just be real brief here, introduce what we're here to talk about tonight. We issued a request for proposals for the interior redesign of the Cascade branch of the Kent District Library on June 29th. We took those on July 27th. The following week, I took the opportunity with Ms. Brown and manager Andrieski to review those proposals. We received 3 of them from what appeared to be all very capable companies, architectural and engineering services. We decided, the 3 of us, on C2AE as a company we would recommend to complete the architectural and engineering services for the interior design of the library. I will let Ms. Brown talk about more in detail what that includes. But I myself am more than happy to answer any questions pertaining to that request for proposal, decision, and contract.
I will primarily just talk about why the proposal from C2AE spoke to where I think the library is going. One of the things I come up quite a bit to speak about is just the idea that the library is a community space. We're a community hub. And what I really loved about their proposal is they put the residents in the conversation. It was one of the few proposals that we saw the residents really being highlighted. And I really want to make sure as we're designing this space, and as I've come to the township board meetings, we've gotten some really great feedback, not just in township board, but also in DDA meetings from residents that are showing up and saying, this is what I want our library to look like in the future. And I still want it to be timeless. I still want it to have that cozy feel. But mostly we want flexible spaces that are meeting the needs of our residents today and hopefully over the next 10, 20 years. So with that, I will turn it over to maybe C2AE.
Yes. Make this brief. I know it's getting late. I'm Dennis Jensen. I'm from C2AE, Architects and Engineers here in Grand Rapids. I personally have been designing libraries since 1992, probably have 40 or so under my belt. It's my passion. And we're excited about the potential of working with Cascade again. We actually designed the original library back in the early 90s. So it's nice to be back. I'm here to answer any questions you have on the proposal. I agree wholeheartedly with what you said about libraries being really the community extension for every home in the district and place for collaboration and community to gather. Libraries are so much different than what they were before. So anyway, so I'm here to answer any questions. I won't get into a long dissertation.
I have a question.
Yes.
I think in all the proposals, there was a amount that was projected anywhere from 1 to 2 million on what was proposing to be done. What is your opinion of that? I mean, is that an accurate number?
Well, let me put it this way. We just took bids on the Spring Lake District Library, which is doing the exact same thing, roughly about 20,000 square feet of reinvented space. You know, some was just new finishes, new furniture, new furnishings. We're adding new meeting rooms, collaboration rooms, maker space. And the bids were right on our target of about $750,000 for the actual architectural and mechanical electrical components of it, and some of the interior finishes and the furniture and furnishings and equipment, the FF&E budget, as we call that, yet to be bid out, but that's going to be budgeted at about $400,000 to $500,000. So we're thinking the $1.3 to $2 million is good work. So we feel pretty good. So we were happy to see the bids kind of meet our budgets that we projected.
Okay, thank
So
you.
we've seen costs kind of level up. No, I wouldn't say they leveled up, but they're not going up as fast as they used to in years past since the pandemic.
Thank you so much for coming in person.
Oh, you bet. My pleasure. Any other questions? I'd be happy to answer.
I just think this is as Lulu said, community space. It absolutely is. And in all of our surveys, this is the most commendable asset in the township is the library. I mean, that the residents speak highly of, and desire to see improved. And so, you know, if we need a motion, I would, or if we need a motion to approve this, I would approve the design selection that the committee recommended.
I think I would just like to hear a little firmer commitment on your hard number. We just went through the fire station proposals. They're on budget. It's an $11 million program. I don't want to hear 1.3 to 2. I want to
It
hear.
really depends on what we have to determine and really revalidate the work that was done back in 2020 by Progressive. And we really need to go through all that to find out exactly what needs to be done, talk about that, and we'll cost it out to see where it is. Right now, it's just kind of it looks like, what we see in the report that was done. It's well, a little loosey-goosey, but I'd like to know more, and I think we need to determine more.
Well, I think.
And so that's the process we go
Once you
through.
come back with a hard number, I want to see that number.
Oh, yeah. Eventually, once we go through what we call the pre-design process and early on in the schematic design, we will get hard numbers, and then we'll actually do a hard cost estimate, detailed estimate to see exactly where we're at.
Yeah.
And then if we were too high, we'll have to scale back, or if we're on budget and we want to do more.
How many
I heard we
times
had
have
like
you,
2.3 million. We're not here to spend it all necessarily,
how many
but
times have
we
you hit
will
that number?
do the best we can.
Well, no, best you can. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for how many times have you hit that number once you've announced
We're
it?
pretty good at it.
Okay.
He said best.
We're looking for
you
no
can and
surprises.
Yeah, and we don't like surprises either. So,
Hard number. I want to see that number come in.
oh, sure. Yeah. And then like, for instance, fit the Spring Lake, we've been watching it, and we actually did quite a big study of many options. The board went back and picked a series of those options, and we costed those out in harder detail. And that was, like I said, it was about a $750,000, $750,000 for the architectural, and about $500,000 for the FF&E. Prices are kind of challenging right now because they are going up. And so we put a little factor for escalations on there, and the bids came in.
We had
pretty
two companies that
close.
took a lot of pride in hitting their numbers, and I
Mhm.
believe they've done it again. So I just when we get to that point, I don't want less light fixtures to meet that number. I don't want cheaper materials to meet that number,
Mhm.
because that's not what's happening at the fire station. They gave us a hard number. They're on it, and that's what I want with this project.
We'll be able to do that.
I just think we need to keep in mind that we don't even have a design yet.
Right.
No, it's
I know.
I'm picking the company, and I want them to be able
And
to.
if they involve the residents and the residents ask for things and they come back to us and say, whoa, this would knock it out of the park for the township, and it's an extra $200,000, we don't know that's going to happen. So I think we got to get the design from them, get the residents' input, get the final design. Then we can go out and get bids and find out what the cost is going to be. But I want to hold you to what your design fee is going to be, but I'm not out to hold you to 1.7 versus 1.75.
Once we have all the hard numbers, that's the number I want you to hit. I'm going to hold your feet to that number.
Sounds like a good challenge. We're up for that.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Trustee Shipley.
Thank you. First of all, of course, I have to ask, we do have this in the budget for this design, okay? But we don't have to play any nutshell games. Second,
It's clearly marked.
and as you all know, I am very bullish about contingency money that's built into estimates. Let there be no contingency money that is outrageous.
Mhm.
Right, Lulu?
Agreed.
And whatever we decide upon, representing the residents and the taxpayers in this township, it has to be Class A stuff, and it has to be reasonably priced. And thirdly, it has to last more than 5 years, because I certainly, as a resident, would not come back here in 6 years listening to say, well, the needs of the township have changed. I don't want to hear that. Okay, that's all.
And so has it been you did initially the design?
Oh, that was back in the 90s.
Has it been redone since then?
We haven't worked here since then.
Is anybody?
So we're,
With this addition,
with
but
your
I
addition.
think it
So
looks pretty
90
original inside still, so.
Well, that lasted quite a while.
Yeah.
So
it's pretty good.
1993,
I think it was
we're going on 30 years.
25 years, I think it is, 26 years.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
I think it was
And
97.
I really liked their proposal. When we had worked with Progressive A&E, we had gotten an initial design, so when he said it wasn't quite firmed up, one of the things before I was in my current position, we needed them to redraw a few lines and we got a surprise bill of $8,000.
That's how the township used to do business with vendors.
Yeah, and I didn't like it from one of the other proposals. What I really liked about this proposal is that it seemed like there weren't going to be many surprises. And so hopefully that will be.
We try not to. We
$8,000.
lay it on the line of what it's going to take. And we think the estimate because I think we said, anywhere between 1.3 to $2 million is what we're based our fee on. But there again, it's kind of a little bit nebulous right now, but until
But
we
having
really
said that,
firm
it's
it
not
up.
gonna be nebulous once we firm it up and.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the fee's going to stay the same, but and who knows, we want to know what you want to do. We're going to go through a process to find out what you're going to do. Is that going to involve the community or residents? So we're going to talk about that some more at our kickoff meeting to determine exactly how we're going to do this. We have some ideas in the proposal, suggestions, and so we'll talk and we'll see what we throw on the wall and what sticks.
Well, it says a lot about your competency that you're not married to your original 30-year-old.
A lot has
design.
changed in the last 25 years, so
Everywhere. All right, sorry, Trustee Shipley.
We have an extremely competent engineer on the township staff. I take what his advice is as gospel when it comes to engineering knowledge. So just be aware that sometimes if you guys come up with some ideas that this is where we ought to go, we may call upon our township engineer to say, yay, nay, or I think there's a better way.
That's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. We're used to that.
As I understand your bid, 159.5 is projected on a building. That's why I asked you about what you thought. And it says 1.5 to 2 million. And this fee is inclusive of travel, meals, printing and shipping. So we're approving the work to be done by this firm based on that fee, as I understand it. I think Tom made a motion.
Shipley supports.
I was like.
And real quick question. Tom made the motion. Okay. Financially, last question though. This is our library fund, right? Our library millage this is in one area, unlike parks, we anticipated these updates in the future, have been saving for them. And this money was available before some of us were on the board pre-COVID, right? And then it was put on ice with COVID. Now we're revisiting it, but.
I think we just looked, yeah.
Okay.
There's 1.5, I believe was that number. We
Yep,
just looked
yep.
at.
Got it.
Shipley support stands.
So motion by trustee McDonald, supported by clerk Slater to approve the design selection request for proposals for the KDL Library Cascade Branch interior upgrade as presented. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Great job, Eric.
We'll be seeing you soon.
Yes. 071-2023. This is regarding an amendment to the Watermark Golf Course condominiums PUD to allow a cigar bar. And before we enter a public hearing on this issue, Director Hilbrens, why don't you give us an overview?
Great. Thank you, Supervisor. So the applicant's requesting final plan approval in order to amend the existing plan unit development to allow for a cigar bar as a permitted use at the clubhouse building at Watermark Country Club. The PUD was created in 1997 and regulates a number of items, one of which is the permitted uses for the PUD. The permitted uses for the clubhouse building currently are listed as one clubhouse / restaurant / pro shop / cart storage building. Because a cigar bar is not listed as a permitted use, the applicant was required to apply for a PUD amendment in order to permit that use. The cigar bar will be located on the lower level of the building, and the applicant had originally proposed that it would also extend to an outdoor patio area. The Planning Commission did have some concerns with the cigar bar extending outside and the effect the cigar smoke might have on other patrons at the clubhouse as well as neighboring properties. So therefore, the Planning Commission recommended approval of an amendment to the PUD ordinance to allow only for an indoor cigar bar. The applicant appears to meet the standards of a PUD, and therefore staff have recommended approval of the proposed amendment. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on this matter at the June 19 meeting and has recommended approval of the amendment to the PUD ordinance to allow for an indoor cigar bar with the 3 conditions listed in the staff report there. So as Grace mentioned, it is scheduled for a public hearing tonight, but before that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
If you know, Eric, Brian, is that down by the locker rooms and in that level?
It is, yeah, on that
Okay.
lower level there.
Questions?
And the
Before we
applicant,
open it to
the
public-
applicant, I believe, is here if you have any questions for them, isn't it?
Does the board want to hear from the applicant before we go into public hearing?
I've just got a question, Brian. Due to the environmental condition of a cigar bar, and on occasion I have a cigar, so are all the safety features taken into account in this design? Do you know?
They should be, and again, that's heavily regulated by the state, and so it will have to meet all state. That's one of the conditions of approval is that it is will meet when it's constructed. Will meet all
And
state
fire safety
standards.
and all that good stuff.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Brian.
Move to go into public hearing.
Support?
Motion by trustee McDonald, supported by treasurer Corstange to enter public hearing on this issue. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are now in public hearing. Anyone wishing to comment on this issue? Now would be the time. Just not all at once.
Okay.
Anyone virtually?
Move to close public hearing.
Support?
So motion by trustee McDonald to close the public hearing on this matter, supported by trustee Shipley. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are now back in close or regular session. Further discussion, questions or motion?
I have a couple things. PUDs are meant to enhance the businesses or the area around that business. As long as this PUD meets those requirements, the property owners request it. It's not going to have a negative effect to the surrounding property owners. I see no reason not to grant this to their request. Been vetted by our
Planning Commission did a nice
planning
job.
commission, yeah. So Shipley makes a motion to approve it.
Support. It's a motion by trustee Shipley, supported by treasurer Corstange, to approve the amendment to the Forest Hills Golf Course Watermark Condominiums PUD as presented. Clerk Slater, please call the roll.
Trustee McDonald.
Yes.
Trustee Nordhook.
Yes.
Trustee Shipley.
Yes.
Trustee Kessel.
Yes.
Treasurer Corstange.
Yes.
Clerk Slater. Yes. Supervisor Lesbrunz.
Yes, motion carried. Thank you, Director Hilbrands. Next up, 072-2023, consider a resolution to amend the Centennial Park Overlay District Ordinance pertaining to density for residential units. Welcome again.
Yeah, see me a couple times here. Included in your packet is a draft of a possible amendment to the Centennial Park Overlay District pertaining to the permitted density for residential uses. Currently, the overlay district allows residential uses exceeding 12 units per acre as a special use, while the proposed amendment would revise the use to allow for residential uses not exceeding 12 dwelling units per acre. To provide just a little background, the Centennial Park Overlay District was created in 2010 as one of the recommended implementation strategies of the Centennial Land Use and Design Plan, was created in 2008. Previously, the Centennial Park area had very few development regulations to guide how the park would be used or how it would appear, and had been suffering from high vacancy rates. As a result, the Centennial Park Association partnered with the township to create the design plan and split the cost of developing that plan. The scope of the design plan was intended to establish a clear and regulated direction for new development and renovations within Centennial Park, and the plan addressed specific areas such as streetscapes, signage, architectural continuity, and infill and redevelopment options. The overlay district was then created to provide some of the development regulations that were previously missing and to establish some consistency when new site improvements were proposed, and also to help bolster the image and marketability of the park. So it regulates a variety of items such as permitted uses, design standards, architectural controls, and site requirements. And one of those uses permitted is that as a special use is high density residential uses exceeding 12 dwelling units per acre. Density and land use throughout Cascade have been a topic of concern that has been brought up at both the Township Board and Planning Commission level previously. The proposed amendment that would limit residential density to 12 units per acre would bring the density in line with what is recommended by the 2019 Cascade Township Master Plan and future land use plan. The future land use designation for the area is called Community Mixed Use, which allows for 6 to 8 dwelling units per acre with bonuses up to 12 units per acre. So we've already began a review. We're currently undergoing a review of the 2019 master plan, working with McKenna on that, which we anticipate to be completed by the end of the year. The goal of the review is to bring the master plan in line with the 2022 strategic plan, as well as provide a deeper look into what are the appropriate densities and land uses for different areas of the township, including Centennial Park as one of those areas. So I do believe Centennial Park could be a good candidate to allow for higher density residential, and that's something that can be further examined as we complete that review of the master plan. So the Planning Commission held the required public hearing to review the proposed amendment at the August 7 meeting, and the comments that were received at that meeting are included in your packet tonight. After the hearing, the Planning Commission recommended that the proposed amendment be adopted. So at this time, again, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have on that.
Trustee Norto?
So this changes special use over 12 units to up to 12 units.
Correct.
And it could also be used by the planning commission to say at their discretion, maybe that one location or another location might be better at 8 or 10 units.
Correct. It's up to 12
Up
as a
to.
special use. So within that review,
Okay,
there'd be opportunities.
thank
to-
you.
But Brian, the way it is today, the special use permit is required to go beyond 12 units, but they can only do it.
It starts at 12 and then 12 and up.
Yeah,
It
so-
doesn't put a cap.
So, right. So the cap today is really 12 until you get the special use permit.
Not the way, if you do a hard reading of the ordinance, under uses by right, it does not mention residential uses. The only time it's mentioned is as a special use for 12 units and higher is the way, if you do a strict reading of the current overlay district, that's how it reads.
It's confusing a little bit as written.
It is a little confusing in that aspect that if
so-
someone wanted to come today and do 6 units per acre, it's not exactly clear if that's even a permitted use because it's not listed under uses by right. The only time residential density is mentioned is this special use at 12 and higher.
Right. But so this would stop it. So today, if somebody wanted to go have 13,
They could do that.
they could do that
They could do.
with special use.
Yep, 13, 15, 30. There's
Whatever,
not a-
right.
But if
But we would have control of it.
Yep, to some.
We could say no to the special use. If they came and said, I want to put in 14, we said, nah, you can do 13. We still have control of it, correct?
Yep, to some extent, if we find that whatever they're proposing doesn't meet some of the standards. of
But
special
then if
use.
we change this, then it says 12 no matter what.
Correct.
Is the cap.
And we're changing it to reflect what's recommended in our master plan. And again, we're currently reviewing our master plan.
Mhm.
So as part of that, we do want to take a look and say, well, maybe this area is appropriate for, and work on a number. If it is 12, if it's maybe higher than 12, that's something that the planning commission's working on and will be brought to the board as part of that process as well.
No more than 12,
Yeah, up to 12.
no more than 12.
Exactly. It provides some clarity that's missing right now.
Okay.
I have a question. You stated your opinion that the Centennial Park area is a good candidate to allow for higher densities. And this is something that can be further examined as we complete our review. So are you going to want to come back and change it back?
We could potentially, again, this is just because there's such a large gap between what the master plan recommends and how the overlay district is written. It's being, addressed to meet that 12 units. But if the master plan is amended to say, for reasons A, B, and C, we think it is appropriate up to 16 units per acre, we could come back at that time and then amend that.
But let me clarify. This is a specific area. This is just for Centennial Park, right?
Correct. Yep, within that
But
overlay
what you're
district.
looking at overall in the master plan is beyond
Yes.
Centennial.
Yep, township
It's for
wide.
everyone.
Yep.
Because it
Centennial
seems
Park
like-
would be,
Includes Centennial.
yeah, one of the areas.
Because it seems like the DDA is a really good area for higher density. We still have control. I think targeted density can be a good thing.
Yes.
I mean, I think one of the residents made a good point that if we don't target the density, then are we going to do away with some of the open space in residential? I mean, I think in residential areas, we've already got a pretty good grip on how large or small the residential area can be. So having targeted density in areas like the DDA seems to make a lot of sense.
It does. And that's something
And the key is
we
to
want to
be
look at more.
intentional in where and how. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
right.
So for example, in Centennial Park, we'll focus on that specifically in the, village area. That's another area where we'll look to see what densities might be appropriate. So again, targeting specific areas where higher density.
But in your
work.
report, as Sue pointed out, you said this area, Centennial Park, because it's already approved for business offices, commercial offices, general offices, et cetera, health and fitness facilities. I mean, one business office, I mean, it's not a traffic issue because one business office alone could generate more traffic than 30 apartments. So it's really not the traffic issue. It's really just a density issue.
Yeah, there's a few different things we look at.
Can you summarize what the planning commission had decided, what their recommendation was?
So their recommendation was the proposed amendment to limit it up to 12.
Right, which is, if I'm reading this right, it's different than what your recommendation was.
No,
No,
I'm
no,
recommending that as written.
Okay.
I'm saying as we're reviewing our master plan, I think it's something we should look at
In the
more.
future.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And again, we're trying to do that before the end of the year. So we'll be coming up.
Okay.
Are we trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist?
No,
Because I don't,
the problems, did you watch the last planning commission meeting? And have you paid attention to what's going on in the zoning with the airport? It exists.
Yeah.
The
Well,
Cascade
but-
Township is under immense pressure from outside entities who are looking to make a short-term profit, but it's always a balance. Everything needs to be intentional. And the reason when the resident who quoted, talk about our utility map and priorities, well, as it is now, where our priorities are for extending sewer and water is adjacent to the airport property on the southeast side, so that can blow up for industrial use.
right, but this
It's
is,
all related. And so when that's the problem, is that these conversations haven't been had publicly, and everyone is under and what isn't being discussed is, okay, density, could we go? Absolutely. Smart growth involves taking into higher density, but what's not being discussed, what's the density right now of the developer from Chicago who's pounding on our door? How many does he want?
So that was maybe 35 units an acre.
Mm-hmm.
But so
Where?
really
But
the
where?
goal in Centennial Park.
Oh, no.
right,
So-
but he can't do that unless we grant it, right? So we still have control over it.
You
Yeah,
should
to
watch the
some
last-
extent, yeah.
To
But
some
I think
extent.
the goal with this is to reevaluate what density seems appropriate with our current planning commission and township board, since it hasn't been looked at in a while. So we're working through that with McKenna, with the planning commission, and we'll bring that to this group as
So
well.
we're not saying we shouldn't have higher density than 12.
No, we're saying pause and be intentional, because we've got some major outside pressures that are breathing down the township's neck that haven't been publicly talked about. And everyone, contrary to what you hear publicly, the township is a wealthy township because of residential property values.
Mhm.
72%, it's all property taxes. Our tax base is 72% residential, 22% commercial, so selling things, buying things. That's the 28th Street corridor primarily, and only 6% industrial. We don't get one dime from the airport. We're not asking for it, but we are under an immense amount of pressure that hasn't, and the way this township was set up under the previous leadership and the decisions that were made, our master plan, our utilities map, everything right now that we have in writing is being used against residents to promote a massive growth, not well thought out, that's eventually, and the only thing missing was that they didn't get the sewer and water, but it all comes at a price. So the guy who's from Chicago who wants to put up the high rise, it's all related, and the more intentional we are, the better we'll be long-term, and the better we're serving residents.
Well, my
Contrary
concern
to
is-
what the narrative is publicly
is-
pushed. If you don't want new on-off ramps on the southeast side, but this board has us poised to go that route, people need to start paying attention about how land use in Cascade Township.
But I just don't want to create a false equivalence of something by the airport and something in Charlevoix.
It's
they're-
right.
they're-
It's
they're-
way worse by the airport. You're right.
Right. They're very different situations. And all I want to say is targeted density in certain areas. And I'm not saying 35 per acre, but it makes some sense.
Absolutely. It makes sense.
So what I'm asking, Grace, is, so what you're saying is this puts a cap for now on Centennial, not the whole township,
Correct.
just Centennial.
Yep.
And the plan is, and I'm looking for Scott's bobbing his head or not, the planning commission is going to revisit this and look at, from a master plan standpoint, where should there be targeted density?
Correct. Township wide. Yeah.
Township wide, and then what should that density be in those areas?
Yes.
Not saying go to
Right.
Cascade Springs or go by Thornapple Elementary School and make the density really high. We're saying in targeted areas like the DDA, we suggest that a special use permit will be needed for more than 12 units for this area, this area, this area.
And we
So
will
we're-
take our time and intentionally make that decision based on professional advice.
I mean, that makes sense to me, but I just didn't want to put a restriction on targeted density everywhere because it makes sense in some places.
Absolutely.
Make a motion to,
I want to make one comment before we move forward. I think the planning commission spent a lot of time on this. And I
Did a
think-
great job.
Yes, and I think we need to go back to trusting them and making sure we're following what's happening with the planning commission and knowing that they did go through every single side.
The
of
planning
this and
commission
look-
has,
And we have to trust
Yep.
them and trust their decision. And if you don't, go back and watch the meetings and see what happened to be able to have specific reasons why you wouldn't trust their decision. I do trust their decision. The other comment I want to make is just looking at some of the other examples, and I'm just going to throw these two out. The Redwood south of Culvers and the Redwood north of Walmart.
Terrible.
5.9 units per acre and the other 6.1 units per acre. And to me, that seems way too high of a density in those areas. And to think of that being how many stories tall and having apartments like that is something I would not enjoy or want to see in my community.
the
And
apartments
so-
behind Culver's are an example of poor or a lack of urban planning,
Yeah. And
lack
so-
of intentional
And so just
planning.
seeing their numbers compared to what may be being proposed in the future, I do think this needs to be looked at very closely. And I support the planning commission's decision.
The planning commission has been doing amazing hard work to fix a lot of things that people don't realize were poorly done in the past or poorly, no one was advocating for us in the past. Not even our own attorneys.
I'd recommend we adopt the resolution to amend the Centennial Park overlay district ordinance pertaining to permitted density.
Support.
So motion by trustee Kessel, supported by both trustee Nordhook and treasurer Verstange, to approve the proposed resolution amending the Centennial Overlay District Ordinance as stated. Clerk Slater, please call the roll.
Treasurer Corsange.
Yes.
Trustee Kessel.
Yes.
Trustee Shipley.
Yes.
Trustee Nordhook.
Yes.
Trustee McDonald.
Yes.
Clerk Slater. Yes. Supervisor Lesbrunz.
Yes, motion carried. Thank you, Director Hilbrands.
He's not done.
No,
It's coming back.
I just want to confirm, do we have our legal counsel on for this one? Our actual legal
She was at the
counsel?
Beginning of the meeting. I hope she's still there. Is Leslie Abdu still on the line? Okay.
All right, 073-2023. Resolution amending the zoning ordinance pertaining to the airport commerce zoning district and to revise the mapped districts. Director Hilbrands, please walk us through, and then we'd like to hear from our own legal counsel on this after.
Yeah, so here again, included in your packet for review are proposed amendments to the zoning ordinance regarding the airport commerce or AC zoning district that were developed by the Planning Commission, AC Airport Commerce District Zoning Review Subcommittee. Currently, the AC zoning district includes two subzones around the airport. Subzone 1 includes all areas around the runways and the majority of the airport area and allows for a variety of uses by right with no site plan review by the township required. Subzone 2 includes the outlying areas adjacent to public streets and requires site plan review for non-aeronautical uses. The amendments touch on a number of items within Chapter 14 of the zoning ordinance and replaces the subzones with new overlay districts that provide additional regulation of permitted uses in the area around the airport. The AC, so these are the new proposed zoning districts and overlays. The AC district covers the entire airport property, allows for a variety of non-aeronautical uses on the western portion of the airport property that would be subject to township site plan review. Overlay A covers area to the east of the north-south runway and limits the permitted uses to aeronautical uses, recreation, schools, and churches, which are permitted by right, and government buildings and offices as a special use. Overlay B allows for additional aeronautical and commercial uses in the area to the southwest of the airport. And then overlay C is located in the center of the airport and is bounded by the runways and allows for the same uses as the AC district, but does not require site plan review since it is there in the center of the airport, except that non-aeronautical uses would still be required to meet the township stormwater ordinance. The Planning Commission held a required public hearing to review the proposed amendments at the August 7 meeting, and those comments, the comments that were received are included in your meeting packet tonight. After the Planning Commission, after the public hearing, the Planning Commission did recommend the proposed amendments to the zoning ordinance be adopted. So again, I'm available for questions, and then Leslie Abdu from Foster Swift is on the Zoom call as well to help answer any questions the board may have.
I would like to hear Attorney Abdu respond to our former attorney / current airport attorney's counsel's statements, his legal analysis.
Yes, can everyone hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. So there was kind of 3 issues in the airport's most recent letter to the township that they took some issue with as it relates to the proposed amendments. And some of those I think Mr. Calden touched on tonight. The first being the incorporation of the airport's airport approach plan and airport layout plan in the township's master plan. We do agree that the township's master plan is required to incorporate the airport approach plan and airport layout plans within its within the scope of what it encompasses. But to what extent that those plans need to be included within the master plan is not really specified in the Zoning Enabling Act. And that's certainly something we'll want to examine with McKenna as the township works through those more comprehensive amendments to the master plan the latter part of this year. The most recent amendments to the master plan approved over the summer was really limited to the future land use map, which is not typically the place we would see a reference to an airport approach plan or an airport layout plan. Typically, those references would be in a specific textual section of the master plan. So it's our opinion that this issue doesn't necessarily preclude the ability of the township to take any action on the amendments tonight, but of course the board could certainly wait to take action until after the master plan review as it relates to the airport if it desires to do so. But we don't think that it necessarily precludes or impacts the ability of the township to adopt these amendments tonight.
His statement was that it does, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Or that it would impact the ability of the township to enforce the zoning amendments without necessarily having a specific reference to the airport approach plan or airport layout plan in the master plan. And quite honestly, that's probably going to be a pretty easy fix, but it's certainly something that we'll want to talk with McKenna about and examine in the current version of the master plan online. The second issue that the airport raised in its most recent letter was that the amendments can't or should not expand any inconsistency between the zoning ordinance and the airport approach plan or the airport layout plan. Now, this is a requirement under the Zoning Enabling Act, which doesn't really define what an inconsistency is, and there's really no case law on this issue. It's not something that's ever been tested yet. But based on what we've seen when we review the airport approach plan and airport layout plans of the airport, rather than listing specific land uses like the township zoning ordinance does, their land use maps just kind of contain broad sweeping categories of land uses like mixed use or non-aeronautical uses. They don't list specific uses like the township zoning ordinance and this proposed amendment would do. We don't see anything in those airport plans that are necessarily inconsistent with what the proposed zoning amendments would contemplate. We certainly are not attempting to regulate or restrict any aeronautical uses within the airport property, which we acknowledge the township is limited in regulating as it relates to state law. So to the extent that there's an inconsistency between the approach plan and the layout plan and the proposed amendments, I don't think I see where they're coming from with that. And then finally, their argument is as it relates to the Regional Airport Authority Act that Mr. Calden referenced, Act 95, and the airport's position as we see it in their letter is that essentially the township doesn't have any zoning jurisdiction over property that is part of the airport, which would be regardless of whether or not those land uses are aeronautical in nature or not. This issue initially came up a few months ago when the airport approached the township about constructing a new car rental facility on the airport property. They had sent a letter to the township detailing their interpretation of this particular statute and why they felt the township didn't have the authority to require site plan review or otherwise regulate the proposed car rental facility. And we provided a detailed letter, the township sent a detailed letter back to the airport, I believe in June, when the issue was first brought up. The board should have received a copy of that letter. Like I said, it was related to the car rental facility, but the analysis still applies. We disagree with the airport's interpretation of that statute for many different reasons, particularly the statutory scheme of airport zoning as it relates to the ability of local jurisdictions to regulate zoning and kind of the overlapping authority between the two. Again, it's detailed pretty extensively in that letter in response to the airport back in June. Again, we agree the township is limited in its ability to regulate aeronautical uses, which is a defined term in the proposed ordinance amendments. We take it directly from the state aeronautics code, but we feel that the airport's interpretation of that statute to say that the township can't regulate non-aeronautical uses as well if they are on airport property is just a far-reaching analysis of the way that statute is worded.
Ms. Abdu, didn't it come up too before that when the airport approached the planning commission wanting to build like that, I can't remember, 36,000 or something cement foundation temporary tent structure?
Yep.
It was on their property. It didn't have any sewer or water. They said they didn't need it because it was just one employee that'd be there sometimes.
Right, exactly. And the analysis is whether or not that's considered an aeronautical or a non-aeronautical facility.
Right, and it was for some kind of a company that's over in Kentwood, so we're not gaining any employees, but we're going to allow a cement foundation, massive tent structure, and it's their position that we don't have any authority to zone that.
Essentially, yes. It's the position as we read it is that as long as it is on airport property, if it's part of the item or whatever the land use is part of the airport property and is an airport facility, which is a very, very broad term under Act 95, the township does not have any zoning jurisdiction over those land uses.
So it's Mr. Cauldron's position that he's telling us we need, that legally he's right, that if they put up a tent and a McDonald's on the corner of the airport, township doesn't have any ability any right to zone it at all or have any authority.
That's how we read their interpretation. Yes, as long as it's on the airport property. Yeah.
And what's the point of having a definition for aeronautical versus non-aeronautical? Did he address that in his letter?
Well, the reason that we incorporated a definition is, as like I said, we specifically took the definition as it's defined in the aeronautics code. And we think it's important to include that to at least cross-reference over to what state statute says, because we do agree that we are limited in terms of what the township can regulate as it relates to aeronautical uses. And that's not, that's not a question, that's not an issue, regardless if it's on airport property or not, if it's owned by the, by the airport itself. But having those definitions is important, and they would suggest, I think, a more broad definition to encompass uses that may not fit the term non-aeronautical under
that's being generous. You're being very generous.
Yeah, so they refer to the term aeronautical facility or airport facility, which is in Act 95, which is a very broad term. But that's entirely different and separate from the aeronautical facilities definition, which is what we typically refer to in local zoning under the aeronautics code. So they're two different terms, and I think they're the way that they relate to the township's ability to zone are different. And our position is that the aeronautical facilities distinction is the one to use as it relates to whether the township can regulate the land use. And there's a case from the early 2000s involving DeWitt Charter Township over in the central part of the state that specifically dealt with this issue and held that the principle that we're relying on here, that the township indeed cannot regulate aeronautical uses, but non-aeronautical is fair game in the
So
term.
just to back up for people who haven't been following this for months and haven't been at the planning commission level, essentially right now, the way we have it in our zoning ordinance, do we just allow anything within the airport property? We voluntarily said, airport, do whatever you want, whether it's aeronautical or non-aeronautical?
There are, and Brian can probably speak to this in more detail, but there are uses. I mean, we in the AC subzone 1 district, in the current version of the ordinance, there are permitted non-aeronautical uses, but right now the way that it's regulated is we have no site plan review is required, regardless of whether it's an aeronautical or a non-aeronautical use. And so
that agreement was the township agreed to that when Mr. Cauldron represented both the airport and the township.
Yeah, but that would have been predating, obviously, our representation of the township. We weren't involved in those negotiations, but it is my understanding that the township did engage in communications with the airport. I don't know who was representing the township at that time, but there was a sit-down discussion to discuss the ordinance amendments and kind of come to an understanding of what our regulatory authority was going to be. But yes, that was several years ago. So yeah, I mean, unless there's any other questions, I think the board has a couple options. I mean, obviously, it could take action tonight. The board could, in light of the comments from the airport, it could certainly postpone taking action tonight to consider, if you want to engage in additional discussion with the airport, like it was done several years ago, could wait until after the master plan review to kind of close the loop as it relates to the incorporation of the airport approach plan or the airport layout plan. Or you could, move forward with adopting the amendments tonight. I will note that the Planning Commission Airport Subcommittee met many times and did consider some of the comments of the airport, at least as it relates to that third issue with Act 95. And has done a great job at, considering and making careful determination to put these amendments together.
Yeah, I just feel like as somebody who used to be on the airport subcommittee, and again, on the planning commission, I trust their recommendation. It was a unanimous vote on their end. So I would prefer to move forward. I'll make a motion to amend the zoning ordinance pertaining to the airport commerce zoning district and to revise the map districts.
Support.
Got a couple comments here. Under the proposed ordinance changes, I see that it would give us some input into some of the things that have already affected the township. Specifically, outdoor runoff and de-icing operations and control of the runoff.
PFAS.
And PFAS, where if we don't have some control over how it's done, I guess it's up to us to live with it. And if I'm correct, we don't have the fire chief here, but if I'm correct, doesn't our fire department still, or our building inspection department still do the hangars and whatnot out there?
Yes. Correct. Yep. Building department does inspections of.
Right. And I believe that Rocky Ray used to go out there and do regular inspections of the Amway hangar and some of the other commercial or private hangars. So if we don't control what's going into the airport for the safety of the residents and the safety of travelers going through our township, we have nobody to blame but ourselves. Therefore, did somebody already supported this motion?
Yep.
Okay, let's call for it.
Yep. And then appreciate the airport's attorneys / our former attorney being here tonight. But I don't see any conflict at all between this being adopted and our ability to have a positive long-term relationship with the airport going forward.
Well,
So on that note, that was a motion pretty much by everybody, supported by everybody, but technically it was a motion by Treasurer Corstange, supported by trustee Kessel to approve the amendment as presented. Clerk Slater, please call the roll.
Trustee McDonald,
Yes.
trustee Nordhook.
Yes.
Trustee Shipley.
Yes.
Trustee Kessel,
Yes.
treasurer Correspondence.
Yes.
Clerk Slater, yes. Supervisor Lesbrunz.
Yes, motion carried. Mr. Rizzi, you're here tonight. Thank you so much. The Planning Commission has done a huge amount of really important work that residents are immediately benefiting from. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're definitely underpaid and underappreciated. And you're not a lawyer.
Might be a good thing.
Moving right along.
Yep. All right, next up, 074-2023, Metro Cruise Gathering Permit.
One more time for me. So the 28th Street Metro Cruise would like to hold 2 outdoor gatherings in the parking lot of the Fulling Warehouse on August 25 and 26. And so because they expect these gatherings to have over 200 people, they do have to apply for the outdoor gathering permit. So it's important to know that these events are separate from the Metro Cruise warm-up on August 24, which is a township sponsored event. The 28th Street Metro Cruise is a separate entity, and they would like to host these 2 pit stops as part of the larger Metro Cruise event that takes place along 28th Street on the 25th and 26th. So this is the first year. The pit stops will be taking place in Cascade. The event will run from 2 p.m. to 9 p.m. on the 25th and from 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. on the 26th. So they have a food truck present on site during the event, as well as the cars come as well. The applicants provided some additional information. It's included in the packet, and then they are here as well. If you have any questions, any event-specific questions for them.
Have you had any negative comments about the Metro Cruise warm-up this year?
No, so I haven't heard anything on it. So the warm-up will actually be this Thursday. I don't believe we've received many negative comments on the past. And then again, this will be a kind of separate event on the Friday and Saturday in a similar location. So it'll feel like a similar event, just a different entity putting it on.
Correct. Understood. Thank you.
I make a motion to approve the outdoor gathering permit for the Metro Cruise.
Support.
It's a motion by Clerk Slater, supported by
Shipley.
Treasurer Correspondence.
Give it to him.
Trustee Nordhook, whoever, to approve the agreement, to approve the outdoor gathering permit for the Metro Cruise. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Good luck. It's a great event.
Scott, I need some training how you're successful. I'm not, and I'm not.
Let's get this meeting. Let's go in our parking lot and get our attorney out back. All right, next up would be 075-2023. Employee vendors doing business with Township, conflict of interest.
Hey.
So.
Yes.
Yeah, I've been waiting patiently.
He just left. Teddy just left.
I know, the last 2
Did he
items,
fill out his form?
the last 2, I don't, the last 2 items are mine here. This one here, I'm going to be very serious about because you have before you a request to make it once and for all to decide whether or not this township board wants any employee to do business with the township while they're an employee. And I'm not talking about doing it when they're on duty or off duty. I'm just talking about period. You need to make a decision whether or not you want employees doing work for the township. My recommendation, as you saw in writing, is don't do it. Make sure that, approve the motion that says employees cannot do business with the city, with the township. I think the biggest thing I want to point out, it just doesn't look good. It doesn't look good to the public when they find out that an employee is doing work for the city, when an employee is doing work for the city without a quote, without a bid, things like that.
Or a former supervisor.
Or whatever, I wasn't gonna mention it, but whatever. It just doesn't look good. So tonight, decide once and for all, put it in writing. And by the way, several department heads have asked me to do this too, to get it once and for all done. And they said they would adhere to whatever we want to do, and they want to say no business doing business with the city. But then we'll have something firm in writing in a policy says don't do it. Now, someone's gonna say, well, what if there is a employee or relative or something of that nature, far-fetched, then we can put in there with specific permission from the city manager and from the township, and with competitive bidding or competitive quotes. That's the main thing. Is I noticed that there were some things going on in this township without bids, without quotes, just going to the people. So I don't think there's gonna be many what ifs, but if there is, we can bring it to the board and say, is this okay with you, right? Yes.
So Ted, are you suggesting that we have you write something for us to approve? Is that what we're?
No, approve it tonight, then we'll put it in the policy manual.
That's what I mean.
All you have to do to approve tonight is say that this board recommends that no employee of the township at any time can do work for the township.
And legal, write it.
Yeah.
With Ted, I mean, just.
Yeah, it would be put in the policy manual.
Right.
I just want to make a comment that's extremely frustrating to me. One of my first 2 or 3 meetings, board meetings, when previous manager Swayze was still here, I had specifically asked regarding the recommendation log from the audit that was the forensic audit that was
Moran's
completed.
forensic audit.
I had specifically asked him at a board meeting what of their recommendations had not been completed yet. And the only thing that we were told was the vendor conflict of interest statements had not all been completed. I'm going to read the number 1 recommendation from the audit and the number 2 recommendation from the audit. The number 1 recommendation from the audit was Cascade does not have a policy that requires the disclosure and approval of related party vendors. We weren't told that we didn't have a policy. We were told that the vendor conflicts had not been completed. Number 2, no vendor approval policy exists. Departments, and it goes on to what our previous workflow was. Those were the top 2 recommendations from the forensic audit. Our previous manager was specifically asked about what on these recommendations were not done, and we were never told that we did not have a policy in place, let alone a policy in place preventing people who work here doing business with.
And this came up because a fake invoice was submitted by an employee who was doing business and had. Okay, leave it alone.
Yeah, we're more to come, I will say.
This is why we haven't gotten to the deer yet, Mr. Hughes. We've been busy. We got to find money and we got to make sure, I mean.
There will be more, I will say there will be more to come to the board. It is just extremely frustrating. Not just things that were not completed, but things that we were told were completed that were not completed. And in the future, you will know of some examples of some things that had happened during this time that you guys should have known about.
Are you suggesting then, Ted, to, we want to adopt a policy that no employees would be allowed to do work for the township? Should we extend that to be, and anybody who's part of a commission or elected official?
No. What we did talk about is elected officials.
Mhm.
Because, and then we talked about today, and I confirmed with Katie, the elected officials are being paid by the township, so therefore you are considered employees.
Okay.
So this would.
Just confirm, I agree with that. Just confirm with legal, because I think they said something.
Yeah, because we're not really employees.
Or technically elected
Anyway,
officials.
It would apply to the employees and the elected officials.
Okay.
Now, any members of boards or things like that have a specific conflict of interest form to fill out, which we're going to make sure they're all filled out.
Service providers,
Service providers, providers, whatever.
legal service providers.
Yeah, and another thing just on this audit is something that I think we need to look at, which we'll talk about at the next Personnel Finance Committee meeting. But I think they also recommended routine approval of approved vendors to come through the board for approval so that we would see what currently we have as active vendors, just so that we could kind of put our eyes on it as well to see and approve those. I think the recommendation is annually or periodically.
So a nice list of everybody we do business with.
Yes.
I can't believe how fast and how effective, like just fantastic.
But it's just logical.
Yeah, but how long have you been here?
I know, but I looked at some of those things and said, I can't believe it.
No, it's awesome.
To be honest with you,
Yeah.
I think sticking up for part of the board that I was not a part of, but I think that at least when I was here, we were told it was in place.
Yes, right. You
That's
were
what's
told
frustrating.
and it
Yeah.
didn't, yeah.
Mhm.
So vote
Takes 4
to
votes.
make this official once and for all.
Okay, I move that we adopt a policy that no employees and no elected officials be allowed to do work for the township.
Supervisor Lesbrun supports
Hmm.
and appreciates. So that's a motion by trustee McDonald, supported by Supervisor Lesbrun to approve the proposed employee vendors no longer doing business with the township.
Well, approved a policy that no employees.
To putting in place the policy and working with legal counsel to draft it.
Right.
All in favor?
We'll bring it to you when it's done.
Aye.
Support.
Opposed?
I mean, you.
Wait,
say
start over.
Does anyone oppose this?
No,
I-
Supposed to approve.
Yeah,
I made a
all in
motion.
favor?
aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thank you for that.
Oh, it's just a formality. It's a no-brainer.
Oh, go ahead.
076-2023, approval of a transportation agreement with Hope Network. Manager Andrzejewski also working hard on this one.
And again, this one is at the end of the agenda, but it may be one of the more important things you've done in the last few months. You have before you a proposal from the Hope Network to provide transportation up and around 28th Street. The proposal that I'm going to recommend that you adopt is one for $90,000 for the next 4 months, which is the budget that the DDA had for the rapid system. $82,000 of that will be used for the buses. About $7,600 of that will be used as a pool to transport members of the community with disabilities, wheelchairs, things of that nature. The Hope Network has a bus side and a disability transport side. So we're going to cover 2 areas. As we've talked about for the past few weeks, this is a ongoing procedure, if you will. So this 4 months will be a test to gather data, to look at the number of riders who use the bus system, to look at the businesses whose employees use the bus system, and most importantly, to gather data on ridership. We don't know at this point, do we have 100 riders a day? Do we have 200 or do we have 10 riders a day? This will allow us to do that. We said when we were going to look at an alternative to the rapid that we would address 2 things, getting people to and from work and helping people with disabilities get to their appointments and get to their shopping needs. This will address both of those. The service will run 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, from the hours of 6 a.m. to 10 a.m., with a small gap between 10 and 1, where we have noticed and have some data on saying there's not much need for the bus during those times for workers. And then pick up again from 1 and go to, I believe it's 11 o'clock. Okay, that will accomplish helping the bigger retail operations get their workers to the first shift, the second shift, and third shift. First and second shift. Boy, it's dry here. Anybody have water?
I do, but I'm drinking.
There's some.
I'll survive.
In the kitchen.
Yeah, in the kitchen.
So,
Jennifer.
I would like the trustees to consider this a trial, a test, a need to see if we need this service and how much of this service we need, using the dollars that were allocated by the DDA. Thank you very much. Wait, it's right here. Yeah, it's right here. Okay.
Hope that's water.
The benefit, that's much better. The benefit to our DDA members is that we're going to provide transportation to get their workers to and from work very shortly. And I don't anticipate this taking too long. We are going to add shoppers. We're starting off with a 22-seat bus And they have a 44-seat bus, and they also have a bigger bus after that if we need it. Any income from ridership, which are going to be $3 each way, very reasonable cost to get people to and from work as compared to a taxi or Lyft or Uber or something like that. $3 each way. Unlike the Rapid, the township will retain the dollars from the ridership fees. Those dollars are going to be put back in the kitty so that we have some money, because $7,600 is not going to last a long time for helping disabled residents over the next 4 months. It'll go back in the kitty to provide more money to transport people with disabilities or to offset if we get a gas surcharge, if the gas price goes up again and again and again. So all those monies will be returned to the township. All right. So you have before there, and I have for the public, I'll put them up here. We have a map. We also have all the information on the website concerning this new bus system. If you follow me here, this is the way it's going to run. The Rapid will end their service at Aquia. Am I pronouncing it right?
Aquist.
Aquest.
Will end their service at Aquis on the side of the road where there's 3 big flagpoles. The business set there is Value City, but I don't like to mention the businesses too much. So look for 3 flagpoles. So literally, people from the other towns and cities can take the bus, take it from the mall, what's the name of the mall? Woodland Mall, and take it to Aquis, where they will pick up the Hope Network bus. And the Hope Network bus will make, I know them by heart, but I'm going to read them anyway. They start at Aquis, and then we'll go to Walmart, we're going to go to Goodwill. These are parking lots. So anybody working in those areas can get off at those buses and walk to their various businesses. Meyer, Cascade YMCA, which is very important because we got calls from residents saying, I'm disabled, I have a walker, I have a cane, I need to get to the YMCA. And if you remember in past statements, the Rapid just took away that stop at the YMCA.
Unilaterally.
We're putting it back. Target, Aldi, and Costco. And then the whole route takes about an hour, then they'll loop around again. Now, the difference between the Hope Network and the Rapid is the Hope Network is going to work with us. If we come back in 2 weeks and say, we don't have enough people at Costco, but we have many people at Target needing a ride. I'm just using an example. We will tailor the route to there.
It's flexible.
Mm-hmm. Then as soon as we see, does a 22 bus seat bus fill up during the day? We need to go to 44. The 44 fill up or not fill up. At that point, then we're going to start saying to shoppers, hop on board. This now bus service is open to anybody, not just going to and from work. So it'll be open to shoppers very shortly. This again will help the members of the DDA get shoppers to their stores using the Hope Network bus. So tonight I'm here to ask you for a 4-month trial at $82,000, which is what the budget that the DDA gave us to work with. Please ask any and all questions.
Budget of 90,000, just
90,000.
I see where we'll be providing disability and handicapped for individuals within the township.
Yes.
And that's my priority as far as I'm concerned. And do they pay? I see we have 7680 to start that fund.
Right, very low.
So let's say somebody lives up in Cascade Woods, calls Hope Network, needs a ride either to Myers or to a doctor's appointment.
Mm-hmm.
Do they pay that $3 out of their pocket or do they just get on the bus?
No, they pay the $3.
Okay.
$3 each way.
Just as
as they would have with the Rapid.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just
Rapid
as
bus was not free.
just as the employees coming into one of the stores in Cascade would pay to ride to their workplace.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Is that subject to also change? So where our residents get a little bit of relief from that in the future after this 4-month period?
If the trustees, yeah, we could look at that.
Alright.
Everything's flexible. If the trustees say maybe our residents with disabilities should not pay the $3, that sounds reasonable.
I would like that very well. I would give you a pat on the back if that happened.
Well, and I would tell, there's not many people here and out there in Zoom land.
More than you think.
We've already said if someone gets on the bus with a disability, that is
That's a good
but
attitude.
it's not for public knowledge.
That's a good attitude.
Now.
Wait, did you just publicly?
It's recorded.
It's now for public, Grace doesn't.
And I'm just gonna.
Put my kids on
This
it.
is for public knowledge. If a person who's riding to and from work or later is a shopper and they get on the bus or they get to the bus, say, I don't have the $3, we're gonna let them on once. And then the bus driver will keep note and the next time, and we'll tell them, we're gonna let you on the bus one time. From now on, you have to have $3.
Now, the pickup mobile for handicapped or disability in the township, are they also going to be limited to the same hours, 6 a.m., 6 to 11, and 1 to 11?
No, I'll confirm that with Scott, but we have two divisions of Hope Network. These hours are for the bus.
Okay,
The Hope Network Rides for Disabled People is a different program.
okay.
Now,
That's good.
also while we're at it, you might ask, what about people, senior citizens? And we've addressed that many times. And anybody out there, please refer anybody 60 and over to the Ride-Link program, a really good program run by the county.
County,
using senior
village.
millage.
Yep.
And it provides door-to-door service for seniors 60 and over. Whether you're going to a medical appointment or you're just going to Meyer. And their charge is $2 each way. And you have to register. Everything again is on our website, but there's a number to call or you go online to register one time. And then you call in advance for your ride. So again, to recap, we're taking care of people 60 and over through Ride-Link. The county is. We are in a way. We're taking care of people or giving people the opportunity to ride the bus to and from work with GoBus or with
Wheels to Work.
Wheels to Work, Hope Network. And then very shortly, we hope to say anybody can get on the bus, whether you're a worker or whether you're shopping. And that's going to depend on the data we get and how many people are riding the bus.
I say, good job, Ted.
Yeah.
Well done.
And just one of the biggest things, you did do a great job, but the biggest thing is I think that the DDA has been trying to get the numbers from the Rapid forever. And you can't make any decisions without having any idea of how many people are actually riding the bus and where they're going and how long and how often. And this is going to allow us to get the data to be able to near the end of the year. We've talked about it, the strategic plan meetings, looking at those numbers at least monthly to know where we're at along the way, to be able to make adjustments where needed to serve
The community.
Yep.
And one of the things I've been driving up and down between those hours of 10 and 1, I don't see a lot of people at the bus stops. Coming here this evening, I counted 6. From where I stay in Kentwood down to here, I counted 6. So we're going to find out once and for all, do we have a need for public transportation in this community or don't we have a need for public? And all we're risking is $90,000, which was allocated by the DDA anyway. All right. I think that covered everything. Please go ahead.
I think, did you look at CBG grant money? I think each year in the past, we donated that money towards.
Separate. It's
What?
totally separate. That has to do with the other side of Hope Network. That's related to paratransit service for disabled and seniors.
Yeah, Hope Network
Totally
also
separate.
provides services everywhere.
And it
for
doesn't,
disabled.
it doesn't affect this portion of Wheels to Work through Hope Network at all.
There was a question that came up, and I think it's going to be an answer your question. When I was talking to the Hope Network, I said, now I understand you have a program to help disabled people with their rides to and from work. I want to make sure that the 7,600, and this is not selfish, this is just reality. that the $7,600 and any additional funds we put into that pot is for Cascade.
There you go, Ted.
residents only.
Because last year the county ran out and we yes, 100%.
And they're gonna keep track of it, and they know, they'll give us a report, and they'll know which ones are in their countywide program covered by things like CBDG grants and grants from the state of Michigan. And they're only going to use our money for Cascade residents.
Okay.
Now, here's something I think most people know, but maybe they don't. I have been told and have had calls from residents outside of Cascade. And the rapid is telling them we're not going to transport you to Cascade, whether or not you live in a millage community or not. So if I live in Grand Rapids and I want to ride to Meyer and Cascade using the Go Bus, they're telling them no. So I suggested to all those people, they call their council, they call their mayor, they call their commissioners, whoever, because you're paying a millage to get that Go Bus supported. How dare you say we're not taking you Cascade because Cascade isn't doing business with us? Now, remember, their bus service is one unit. Their Go Bus is another unit. They've tied the two together with us and said, because you're not having the bus go down 28th Street, we're not going to give you the Go Bus either.
And then they said, call Cascade Township.
I think I've covered everything.
Make a motion that we approve the transportation agreement with Hope Network for 4 months.
Shipley supports.
It's a motion by trustee Kessel, supported by trustee Shipley to approve the proposed agreement with Hope Network as stated. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Ted.
Thank you guys very much. Let's hope you get a ton of rides. Here's maps up here if any of you guys want them.
No pun intended.
Yeah.
Discussion, having none, we'll move on to our public comments. Thank you for sticking it out. It's been a long meeting. Welcome to comment on anything. Anything. We'll take in-person comments first and then we'll go to virtual. Welcome, Mr. Hughes.
Yeah, it's been a while. I want to share the board's compliments to Director Mannion. She's doing a remarkable job. And I can say that with confidence because I attended the last Parks Committee meeting that was a week ago Tuesday. What's clear is there's a ton of stuff to do. She's already done a ton of stuff, but there is that much more that's got to be done. There's been a lot of neglect. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way, it just hasn't been done. The committee clearly is working very hard as well. Unfortunately, one thing that hasn't been done is the plan that Director Mannion mentioned at the May 24th meeting, I think in response to your question, Trustee Shipley. And that plan is not a deer management plan. It's just simply putting together the things that need to be done to get to the point where you can have a deer management plan. So at that meeting, I suggested that perhaps instead of having the Parks Committee look at this, that there be an ad hoc committee appointed. And that seemed to get some traction with Supervisor Lesperance. And I followed that up with an email to Supervisor Lesperance, which I'd asked that she share with the rest of the trustees.
I apologize for not getting back to you on that yet.
That's, well, no, you're busy too. I mean, that's obvious from tonight's meeting. But this isn't just a practical suggestion. It really is the suggestion that Dr. Keys made at the April 12th meeting, which was for 5 months ago. And that is what often happens after you have a report like he put together is having a committee. And he specifically talked about his experience at Blandford Nature Center. And that committee was not just the staff at Blandford or the other people who have supervision over Blandford, but also getting all the stakeholders together because there were more stakeholders than just simply Blandford, and most importantly, the surrounding communities. And that Blandford then was simply one part of that committee. I think that's a great suggestion, because all of the deer management plans that I've read and all of the people I've talked to, you don't get anything done unless you have buy-in from everyone. If you don't have buy-in from everyone, and particularly the people that are specifically impacted, in this case by the deer, you're going to have controversy, and that's the last thing that the board wants. So I would suggest that you seriously look at, instead of simply delegating this Parks Committee, which is clearly overwhelmed at the moment, is to think about putting together an ad hoc committee. Certainly have Director Mannion a member of that, if not officially, at least ex officio. Perhaps have the committee chair or a committee person or two committee persons be on that committee, but also start reaching out to the community, the neighborhoods around Burton Park, which is clearly part, at least based upon what I think Dr. Keys was saying, is clearly being impacted by these deer as well, not just simply the park, so that you can get all that input and move towards a deer management plan. So thank you.
Thank you.
I did find a file. I haven't looked at it yet, but I found it the other day. It says call management. So I'll look through there, see if there's anything interesting in there.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Hughes, do you know too, like the cost? I know we're not anywhere near that, but we're working a lot on the financials to figure out what we have for, prioritizing things. Any idea like what that would cost?
That's hard to say. And part of the problem is one of the things that Director Mannion said at May 24th is what's important about her plan. One of the key components is education. And that is learning as much as you can about what is the problem. And I agree with that. And you've got to start accumulating data. And there is available data. There's, I know that Commissioner Wojak, that's right, isn't it? Yeah, Commissioner Wojak is working with Road Commission, trying to get them to start recording the exact locations of deer pickups. According to Dr. Keys, there's also apparently, I think it's the Michigan State Police, there is a database there that talks about, or that has information, because he referred to it specifically in his report.
I just meant as far as like call actual professional.
Well, and see, the problem is it's hard to tell until you know how many you're going to have to remove. And that, I think, is the most important thing, is to get a more accurate idea of how many deer there are and what would be a reasonable call. If I recall correctly, if you're using sharpshooters, it's about 200 a deer.
30 seconds.
But Mr. Hughes, what you're asking for is the ad hoc committee.
Yeah.
Just to get this started.
Get it started. It's, and to start accumulating data.
Does he have a mic? Okay, we're good.
Is that something we can do, Grace? Do ad hoc committee and maybe have Mr. Hughes, head it up with
Yes, and
Melanie.
City of Grand Rapids
It's just.
is just starting the process.
They're working.
What are-
I thought it'd be, they're 10 times our size. I think that might be an interesting one to kind of follow and see what they're doing.
Well, Kalamazoo had a neighborhood associations do this as well, and they had an extensive report. And I've talked with the person who led that ad committee, and he had a lot of good input.
I'm
not opposed. I mean, we certainly will look into the yes.
Okay.
And we'll definitely have more time too. Oh my gosh. Yes. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Enjoy.
Thank you, Jeff, Mr. Hughes. Any other public comments? Virtually?
Yes, we have 3.
Oh, good. Brian.
So I'm not sure the name, but they are unmuted.
They can just state their name and address for the record.
It's actually Scott from Hope Network.
Oh, good.
Mr. Alsgaard? Well,
Um,
thank you.
I was trying really hard to figure out how to get in here. And I was trying to do it before I'm very happy passed the proposal. But I think it's important to note that the pricing that's on there is based on the 22 passenger CDL bus. If we do have to go up to a 44 passenger bus, it's more expensive to run that bus. So we would have to revisit that if we got to that point.
What if it, remember how the initial conversations were more limited, focused more on the original Wheels to Work scope? If the analysis comes back that 22 might be more than what we need, is the Hope Network flexible in toning down the service also?
If I understand what you're saying is that if it turns out after we've done this that we need 2 stops instead of 6,
Mm-hmm.
yes.
And like maybe 5 times a day instead of 10, or
Yes, absolutely.
you said it much better than I did.
Yes, that's it. Absolutely. We talked about that, the flexibility, and that, you know, there's going to be a lot of excited people around here when I talk to them tomorrow. That is the thing, that we can be flexible, but I did want to make sure I don't know the rules. So I was trying to put that in there before you guys approved it, is that if the need in this 4 months that we have to use what we call Moby Dick because it's white, the 44 passenger bus, there would be an increased cost, or we would not be able to provide service as long because it is a lot more expensive to run that than it is the CDL bus.
And also remember, we talked about if that were to happen, we also were figuring how much extra income we would have coming in.
Which is slated to go to the handicapped and the disabled.
Well, it could go elsewhere too. I mean, we left it in there that it would go into the pot and go to the disabled, but if we found that we didn't get enough ridership from the disabled, we would use it also to offset any fuel charges, and we could offset any additional charges from your company. I'm just trying to say, if we get a bigger bus, that's great. That brings
Okay.
in more in.
And my point is I just wanted to be on the record to say that if we have to go to the bigger bus, it's going to cost more.
Sure.
Oh, right. No, thank you. As soon as it was on the table for an option, you immediately went out to all the different businesses, met with us. Ted, you went out to different businesses. You guys have just been fantastic. And because of your work, there's not going to be any delay when the rapid service ends on the 28th. So we really appreciate it.
Yeah, and we've been talking a lot and have drivers lined up, and we'll be ready to go. You know, one of the other things that we had talked about is because of the short time frame that we got involved, there will be some hiccups in the first few weeks. I just am predicting that. We will do everything possible to avoid any hiccups, but we did this in a week, what would normally take months. But I have full confidence that we'll do it well.
Me too. Thank you. Any other comments?
Yes, this is James.
Hello?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yes, here. All right, thank you very much. Hi, my name's James White. I'm a rider. I am a rider on the rapid bus service, and I'm sorry I was not able to know about your guys' decision earlier, but I have some information here to share with you. I know y'all have already made your decision. I had not had to get a chance to check out the new information about the Hope Network and what have you, but I will look into that. And but the documents that I have is I don't know why the Rapid didn't provide this information to you or what numbers they have, but I got some documents from the Rapid, and the documents that I have for each bus line service that they have, it shows a percentage of change by each route. And from March 2023 compared to March 2022, Route 29 specifically had increased almost 50%. In April of 2023 compared to April 2022, Route 29 only increased almost 60%. And it's the same thing with May of 2023 compared to May of 2022, increased almost 60%. I ride the bus. I shop at Walmart out in Cascade Township. I live on the northeast side of Grand Rapids. So I travel an hour and a half to work, and I work at Dollar Tree out in Kentwood. And the reason why I come out to Cascade Township, just like amongst the other people, is because of the stores that you have out there, and because people work out there like I do. I go out to Walmart, and my bank out there is out in Huntington. I've been doing this for 2.5 years. And so I've built a relationship with people that I've known, my bank tellers, people at Walmart. And now that you guys decided to cut the service off, I have to build new relationships and what have you, and find a new bank and go to a different store.
Wait, why do you think we cut service off? Did you listen? You're going to get the same. We didn't cut service off.
Well, no, I mean, you cut the service of the Rapid.
Right, but we replaced it with a service that picks people up where the Rapid stops and takes them to those same locations.
Yeah, I heard that, ma'am. And that's why I said you're, I don't know who that guy, Ted, I think you were saying?
Manager Andrzejewski, yes.
You will be able to take the bus just like you have now and get off at Aquis and hop on the Hope Network bus and go to Walmart, go to your bank or wherever you want to go.
Right. And I heard that you said I could go onto the website. I haven't done that because I just heard this while you were talking about it. So
who gave you the information, your statistics on ridership being up? Where did you get those?
Online.
From who?
On the Rapid. You go to the rapid.org and go to the board of directors and download the packets of the agenda and the minutes and what have you.
What?
Yes.
I spoke to the.
Wait. So you got from the Rapid on their website, the statistically ridership is increased.
Can you see is my camera on? Can you see me?
No.
We have a report that did an analysis about ridership and all this stuff. We spent a year looking closely into this, so you might want to take a look at that. There's a link on our website. It's helpful.
Okay, I will. Like I said, I wasn't aware of all this going on. I'm just trying to relay my side of it as a rider, going out into your township for 2.5 years, and I've seen the ridership personally myself. All the passengers that are on the bus that have gone to various stores out in your township because they have
30 seconds.
Thank you, ma'am. They have a whole bunch of shopping goods that they bought out in your township, and people that worked out in Walmart and Myers. I've talked to a couple of people because I've seen them on the bus, and I say, "Hey, where you doing when the bus service the Rapid?" I'm not saying your new service. I'm just saying the Rapid at that time. I'm not sure if they knew about it either, but they said they transferred to different stores. So that's just my opinion. And like I said, I'll follow up with you, Township Supervisor. I meant to email you. And thank you very much. Y'all have a great night. Thank you.
You too. Thank you.
Couple of things, when I met with the Rapid, he said the ridership went up, but it was way down because of COVID.
And it didn't get back to pre-COVID.
They never even come close to where they were pre-COVID. So it's just, you could say, yes, our ridership went up, but it's not anywhere near where it was. I think he told me it'll never get to where it is. So, and the other thing, as I said, we're going to open it up to shoppers as soon as we can. So we just need to see the first week or so, maybe the first 2 weeks, make sure we have enough room to get the workers to and from work.
Thank you.
There's one more. Dewey?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Rob Dewey, 5805 Snow Avenue. So I'm just inquiring about the potential Snow Avenue paving project. There was a motion passed on April 12th to take next steps on that. Just wanted to see if there's been any update since that motion.
No, the last is I spoke to someone in we spoke to someone in your neighborhood and said, after the last board meeting, we need numbers, who supports it, who doesn't, who lives there, what side of the street, are you on the Cascade side, on the Lowell Township? I haven't seen, and I don't think anyone here, we haven't received those. So as of now, the ball is still in the residence court to provide us with that information.
The motion was passed by the township here to submit a solicitation to the Lowell residents that work with, and to work with Lowell. So as we have it, yeah, I just looked at the message for April 12th. Please look at your agenda minutes, and that motion was passed for you to take next steps.
Wait, time out. Okay, we can go back and look, but as of now, this board needs information from the resident. The ball's in your court, and we haven't gotten that yet. So
Historic data we want.
historic data we wanted, we haven't gotten it. So I don't remember to go to Lowell. I mean, we certainly were open to that. We need to know how many people live on the road, who wants it. Half of you guys live on Lowell's Township, doesn't affect, and half are Cascade. We are willing to work with residents. We gave direction, but
There was a motion ordered, and it was unanimously approved on April 12th. It's in your minutes. It was by Mr. McDonald to create a solicitation of
what is a solicitation?
To get information from the resident.
Oh, a
And you had, the solicitation was, would you approve this with the 30%? You actually had a number as to how much you would contribute. You want me to email you the minutes?
Oh, we have them.
No, we want to know who lives on your street, what township they're in, who supports it, who doesn't. We are still waiting on it. And we're happy to work with Lowell if they're going to help collect taxes, because we can't force Lowell residents to pay Cascade taxes, which is why we need the partnership of Lowell. Do you live on, which side are you on, sir?
I'm on the Cascade side.
That's good. Yeah, I don't know what you mean solicit.
I will tell you what the minutes say that he's referring to. I'm not sure it's written exactly correct, but motion by trustee McDonald, seconded by trustee Kessel to direct staff to solicit from residents of Cascade and Lowell if they would pay up to 32%, which I don't remember a percentage.
That's much different than what you're stating, sir.
32%.
No, that's exactly what I'm saying. I read it, and it was a solicitation.
Let me
that included
finish.
32.
Let me finish, please.
Okay.
Up to 32% via a special assessment district, and work with Lowell to see if they will collect from their residents.
Yeah.
So that was a direction to your staff that you have not done.
No,
we
not
did
at all.
wait, we did
No.
correct our staff, but our previous manager did not follow through with it. So
Wendy, and I think to tag on it, I think Ben did follow up with Lowell and ask him if they would collect it, and they said, wait, they want to know part of it.
I think you're right. Actually, that
Correct.
did come up. You are correct.
That
So
they
that's
would
where
not collect it.
That's where. it's
And
at.
we haven't been able to get the numbers from the residents either, so
So if it.
Lowell Township already said they would not.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that part, but
Let's revisit it.
we're happy to bring it up
Okay.
if there's resident support.
Yeah, we had a
Just
full,
to contribute.
we had a full public meeting on it. You had majority support. You passed the motion.
Mhm.
And then nothing has happened since that motion. So that's why I'm bringing it up, is to see what
Treasurer
next step.
Person,
So
can
it
you
sounds
do that
like,
again? Yeah, I want, hold on. Let's read what the minutes say.
okay.
Consider Snow Avenue reconstruction project. Motion by trustee McDonald, seconded by trustee Kessel to direct staff to solicit from residents of Cascade and Lowell if they would pay up to 30% via a special assessment district, and work with Lowell to see if they will collect from their residents. So that was the directive to staff. I'm now going to our next meeting to see if I see information, because I do remember Ben coming back and saying to us, Lowell would not do anything with it, which is where it stopped, because they wouldn't they wouldn't collect from their residents.
Right, it
in a
became a
special
moot point
assessment.
by
So then we didn't even move forward with it from there.
Dead horse.
Because
I ran into one of the residents at Home Depot within within a month of this last meeting, he asked about next steps and he wanted to go to Lowell directly. I said the same thing. The board needs information of total residents, whether they're Cascade or on the Lowell side, who supports it, who doesn't, and we have to have that to move forward. So I guess now we're soliciting you guys for that information. Would be the next steps if you want anything done.
Okay.
We did it. We're done.
We're not going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars paving a road if it's for, we got to know what the residents want and where they're at and if they have skin in the game.
And all the residents would have to pay for it with a special assessment,
Right.
which includes the Lowell side, which is what our conversation was. And we would have to have them approved to collect that money from those residents. And they have told us they will not do it.
Right. And we cannot force a different township to collect taxes from their residents.
It's just disappointing when you have an amendment that you approved to have your staff solicit the residents and that did not occur.
Time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Oh, I also spoke on the email. There was another resident. I had the same conversation with multiple residents. There was a woman that I emailed with, told her exactly what she needed to do, what we needed. The resident who lived in Lowell, but was.
And I talked to Dale Vanderstaff because he was the one that came to our meeting.
Yes.
I told him he had to do the same thing and so I think we've covered it. I think we did what we were supposed to do.
Manager comments?
Okay, I'm just gonna make this short. We covered most of the things. I want to reiterate how working with the board and through your direction, we have tightened up and reminded all employees, department heads, et cetera, about the purchasing policy. And the purchasing policy works like this. Anything over $1,000 requires 3 quotes, and you need to get a purchase order before the service is performed and before the product is ordered. Then when you get the 3 quotes, you choose the vendor. When you get the product in or the service performed, the manager or the supervisor must verify that the product was received or the work was done. And then and only then would we then process the invoice through the rest of this where it comes to me and then to the board. So in the past, we found that purchase orders were issued before, things were ordered and services performed before they got a purchase order. We found that things were not being checked to make sure that the work was done or the product was received. So all that stuff is now being tightened up, and I don't think we're going to see any I know we're not going to see any problems in the future. There's one less part of that. If it's $25,000 or more, it must go out for a RFP competitive bid. We're going to get competitive bids with the quotes, but when you get to the $25,000 level, you actually have to do a formal bid. So thank you for working with me on that, and we've tightened all that purchasing up.
Thank you,
Ted.
Board member comments?
Thanks for coming, Mr. Hughes. I think that Mr. Hughes is right on with the next step that we need for the Cascade residents and solving or curtailing the deer damage to the township. Mr. Rissy, love seeing you at the committees. Thanks for volunteering for a lot of things. I'd like to know how I can get my name in as a second on some of these motions. So maybe it's just a matter of age. You're quicker than I. Okay.
Don't give them any hints.
And I would do everything within my power to keep a quality guy like this in the township. But I know what his goals are.
Exactly.
And I know that we've decided.
Yeah, and we'll make sure we get a smooth transition.
But you should. I mean, we can kind of glue your arms together so you two don't leave.
We could,
But other than that,
we could take the keys to his car.
Yeah.
I'm glad that the board has taken a lot of steps into tightening and providing answers to the taxpayers. And I brought up before, Mr. Rissy and the SAD committee, we sure would like to know how much money goes into the SAD fund, how much we've used, and how much is left for additional projects.
Probably be at their next meeting.
Good, I'll see you there.
Yeah, thank
That's all I
you.
have.
Trustee McDonald?
I hate to extend the meeting, but this is kind of important. We talk about things that can slip through the cracks with all our cases. And we've had a couple in the ZBA where we especially, from COVID, but other reasons, other cases where we had stipulations, we provided a variance with stipulations. For example, you can have this temporary container on your property for 6 months, but it's been there 18 months. So we heard from the residents, we didn't know about it. We said, why has it been there 18 months? Well, it slipped through the cracks. Staff didn't know. So, or didn't follow up. And not to fault the staff, but we know that the biggest slip through the cracks was Round Hill. And the Planning Commission did a very thorough job, made a lot of recommendations. And when we talked about it, I talked about having a project management system. And we said, no, our BSNA software does that to track, I taught project management, but case management. Take all the documents, all the tasks, any notifications or alerts based on tasks or conditions. So if there are tasks or there are conditions to something, and they've got 6 months or 12 months that they get this temporary permit, we had to have a notification comes up for August of 2023. What are all the things that we need to not fall through the cracks? The point is that I went through this today with Madison in emails because a couple of things have fallen through the cracks at the ZBA level. And she had mentioned, gee, Brian and I wish we had a tickler file.
Yes.
And I thought, but wait a minute. We asked a year and a half ago about this, and BSNA software is supposed to do that. And she said, yes, I think it can do that. So I recommended contact BSNA, ask for training. Let's get training because we need to have, for every case, we need to have who's responsible, what the tasks are, what the conditions are. If there's a 6-month temporary permit that we allow, after 6 months, we need the notification. So, I understand there's a lot of things that can slip through the cracks, but if we have the software that'll track those things, we need to have the notifications.
I think we do, but it's not the BSNA software. I thought part of the Round Hill discussion was that a different software was purchased for the township that can do that. Stand up and tell us.
That the building department also
You
uses,
need to
right?
help my brain because I thought we had some.
When I was on that committee, it was a component of the BSNA
Right.
software.
Okay.
Like we had to buy another part of it, a module or something. And then I thought that had already been done.
Me
but
too.
Maybe not.
But when I found out a couple of things slipped by the ZBA, because we didn't remember that 18 months ago, we put
Right.
certain conditions on.
Yeah, no, that was part of the Round Hill thing, which included, because that was what was
I agree.
great about it, was it wasn't just about planning commission stuff that was going on. It was things.
Right.
Other.
But it could be for the ZBA, the planning commission, the board. But the point is,
Your containers that you're talking about were actually in the conversation about using that software to monitor things. That was one of the examples we
the point
used.
is,
Are they at a big box store?
Yeah, was that me complaining about something that I don't like to see?
It starts with a W.
You or Ralph, I'm not
no,
sure.
by the way, we did do a temporary containers for some of the big boxes and they abided by it.
Okay,
This is a residential one.
got
I
it.
was talking about the big box
Yeah.
ones.
No, this was a residence and the neighbors of the resident came and said, hey, this has been for 18 months. We said, really? So, the point is things can slip through the cracks.
Uh-huh.
And so Madison might come to you, Ted, and say, hey, can we get training on this? Because I asked, does this already exist? And she said, yes. Not that we're using it or have that module.
It's there. They don't know how to use it.
Correct. And that's why I said we need training.
Yeah.
And then we need to put people responsible to put in what are the conditions, who's responsible, what are the dates? Because we ought to have a notice the first of every month. This month, August, this month, September,
This is coming due. This is coming due.
these things, these permits are needed, these expire.
That was
Anyhow.
still part of that process.
Yeah, so I thought we handled this. So, it's,
Wasn't it?
No, you were
building
this-
department?
Yeah, so maybe she
Building
just didn't.
inspections?
but it's part of BSNA
Yeah, but I think it was part of their.
and they probably use it,
Yes.
Yeah.
but we don't use it.
Everybody hasn't been trained to be able to use it, it sounds.
Correct, because we need it for the ZBA. We need it. So, but the point is, if it's by case, we all see the same cases. It goes to the planning commission first, then it comes to us. So if we start it at the case level, whenever we start, whoever's going to see the case, whether it's the planning commission, the ZBA, the DDA, or the board, this same software can be used for all of those. And we just need to implement it.
Good to know. Thank you.
So sorry to extend the meeting, but that was kind of it's an important one.
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Support.
It's a motion by Clerk Slater, supported by, I don't know,
Treasurer Corsi.
Shipley, to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.